Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Eren Was Ghidorah? Ekamikami64 wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Annie was very happy to have her skills at keeping her face a mask of cool apathy, because she was honestly scared out of her mind right now. Armin wanted to take the night shift with her tonight. The last chance she'd have to gather any intel. For no reason at all, he claimed. Did he know or suspect something? Did the commanders? More importantly, did Eren? She could feel those green eyes staring at her in the night. He didn't do that, he never did that before. Most nights she was on watch, Eren was asleep. If he wasn't, he was still staying in the same area, so they didn't have to fumble around in the dark keeping up with him. He might glance at her. He even tried talking to her once. But he didn't stare at her, let alone this intently. Only one set of eyes was doing it though. Did he think he was being subtle? That it was any less obvious or unsettling to have two giant green eyes peering into her from the darkness instead of six? Because it wasn't. Sorry. Annie didn't flinch, but she did frown at Armin's apology. For what? Armin smiled half-heartedly as they both sat on the edge of a roof. After last time, I thought it might be a good idea for us all to get used to teaming up with one another, instead of just sticking to the same teams all the time. Annie thought about it for a moment before responding. You make it sound like this will be a normal thing for all of us from now on. Armin shrugged. Ideally. The alternative is that they try to isolate us from trips. He mused pessimistically, using the codename out of habit at this point. That made sense, she decided. This could all be a coincidence, but you don't think the last few years of training were enough time for us to get used to each other? Armin nodded to her point. Most of us. Mikasa. Now that made a lot of sense. The only one she'd want to be paired with are you or the one we're guarding, she said almost as a joke. Armin chuckled at that just a bit. So, how's Bertholdt adjusting? Armin asked curiously. To the idea that Trips is Eren? Annie asked rhetorically. About as well as the rest of us did. Trying not to piss himself while talking to something with that many teeth. Most of the others are more focused on which head to look at, Armin returned with amusement. Annie hummed in acknowledgement. What about Krista? Is she handling this all right? Armin tried to cover up the almost grimace with a smile, but Annie caught it. Pretty good, actually. She wasn't too surprised, really. In the sense that, well, he still behaves a lot like himself when you think about it. Annie could understand that but pressed to her real question. That wasn't what I meant, she stated, getting an odd look from Annie. I mean, how's she handling the situation with Ymir? Dead silence came over them for a second, and Annie wondered if she overdid something or gave something away. But Armin sighed and massaged his temple, allowing her to internally relax. I don't know, to be honest. She's stressed, but they're keeping us in the dark about that side of things, Armin remarked. You think they shouldn't? Annie asked with a raised brow. No. To them it's necessary. Despite everything, there is still a chance that Eren and Ymir already knew about each other. From their point of view, I mean. So keeping them and all parties involved separate is a precaution on their part, Armin mused thoughtfully. I'm more worried about how Krista will be if things don't work out for Ymir. Annie tilted her head. You don't think they will? I don't know enough to guess, Armin admitted. I'm not too worried about the military and him, he said, nodding to Eren's form in the darkness. But they'll be inclined to kill and dissect Ymir at the slightest reason. Even if it means giving up whatever we could learn from her. And there was a very, very good chance of that. They both knew that, if for entirely different reasons. Armin set out a breath as he leaned back on the roof. I'm just happy we can have peaceful nights like this. Peaceful, eh? Annie murmured as they both stared up at the stars. Of course, someone else was staring, but not at the stars. Are you happy now? It's a start. Why are you like this? Hey, I just want to see Armin happy. Why Annie though? Hey, I don't control who he has a crush on. You can control sticking our nose in it. Hush, they're talking. Fine. Thank you. You think the stars look the same in other places beyond the wall? Armin asked wistfully. I don't know, Annie answered honestly, having never really paid them much attention. You think there's a place where it never snows? Huh. Armin looked at her curiously. It doesn't snow as much in the south. You think there's someplace so far south that it never snows? Annie repeated idly. Oh, yeah, I read about someplace like that. Deserts, I think, Armin remarked. Annie paused, knowing Armin probably shouldn't talk about that so openly. You called him a dragon, right? Yeah. Some old storybook my grandfather had, Armin mused. It had an old drawing in it of a big lizard with wings that breathed fire. Annie raised an eyebrow. I don't see any wings or fire. That's probably for the best, the fires I mean, Armin said with a sheepish smile. And yeah, it's not exactly like in the book, but it still looks about right, the heads and necks at least. Annie nodded absently. So, what, there were things like him around before the Titans? Armin gained an uncertain look at that. I didn't think so. I thought it was just a story, a tale for kids to enjoy. But who knows, it might have been a story, but maybe dragons are real. They aren't, Annie thought to herself. Or if they were, they weren't out in the open. I wonder how many more peaceful nights we'll have, Annie muttered absent-mindedly. We can only hope for a lot of them, Armin answered softly. After all, it was set in stone that any peace would end, but they could at least make the time they have last. Well, at least they're having a nice time, I guess. Next day. Commanders, allow me to introduce my comrades, Frida said as they gathered in the office. Pixis, Erwin, and Hang were all standing in front of a desk. In front of them sat those sent to judge the shifter and the beast. This is Pastor Nick, representing the Church of the Walls. Frida waved to the one across from her, a priest made obvious by his robes and the bands along the neck with the symbols of the walls. As was often the case, the holy man seemed very displeased about the situation. Hang suppressed a scowl. They had no friends with the church, and it was troubling to think the government was giving them any say in this matter. She was sure if it was up to him, both Eren and Ymir would be put to death. This is Gel Sands, one of the officials in charge of keeping track of the southern region's finances and expenses, Frida said, waving to the plain-clothed man with deep, dark circles around his eyes. Pixis hummed to himself. In a less formal moment he would have taken a drink from his flask, but abstained from doing so. He did not recognize this man. As the leader of the southern portion of the garrison, Pixis made it a habit of knowing everyone important to the region by face or name. Gel Sands was a stranger to him, someone just low on the non-military totem pole, perhaps? And to my left is one of the higher-ups of the military police, acting as their voice in this. Captain Traute Caven, Frida said, motioning to the military woman by her side. Erwin had already taken stock of the blonde woman and already came to the conclusion that, if anything, she was here as a bodyguard. For exactly who and against what, it was hard to presume. But the blue-eyed woman had an almost apathetic gaze, as if she could care less about what was going on around her. Perhaps she didn't. Perhaps this was just a job to her. Regardless, he was sure that her sitting next to Frida was a deliberate choice. The scout commander nodded. Thank you all for coming. As you know, this is a confusing time. I'm sure you're all aware, but I am Erwin Smith, commander of the Scout Regiment, and this is Commander Pixis of the garrison. Along with me is Field Commander Hang. She has spent extensive time studying Titans in the past and, more recently, our mysterious new ally. Ally? Pastor Nick exclaimed with a glare. That foul creature defiled the walls with dash. Excuse me, Pixis interrupted swiftly with a faux amiable tone. But he was following our plan on my authority. If you have a complaint about the plan, you should direct it to me. The pastor looked ready to do just that before Frida raised a hand. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. There should be an order to this. The room quieted at that, the preacher reluctantly holding his tongue. Hang took this as her chance to clear her throat and grab their attention. I believe we should start with the basics. Has everyone been briefed on the secrets regarding the shifter and trips? Humor us, Sands remarked with the same dead expression and tone. Let us make sure we are all on the same page. Hang glanced to the commanders, who nodded. Very well. As you all should know, both creatures are actually cadets, members of the 104th to be exact. The shifter's identity is Ymir, no last name, while Trips, as we've codenamed him, is Eren Yeager. No one was surprised by this information, but Caven did lean forward while Nick ground his teeth to himself. Have you managed to get any information out of them? Sands questioned with a frown. It's been days. Yes, well, Eren can't speak. We can only communicate with guessing and him nodding yes or no to tell us when we're right, Hang explained, keeping Krista out of the briefing. That said, he claims to have no knowledge of what he is or how he became it. What he is? Caven questioned with the slightest arc of a brow. You're positive he's not a Titan? Despite the size, he doesn't have any of the normal characteristics of Titans, Hang explained. Sunlight isn't a factor, his healing is completely different in appearance and he has an asshole. Everyone blinked at that, Frida snorting hard as she suppressed a laugh. I'm sorry, did you just say that? Pastor Nick asked slowly. Titans don't have digestive tracts, Hang answered bluntly. And despite no claims or signs of hunger, he does in fact have one. And you know this because? Caven asked with morbid curiosity. I checked, Hang answered bluntly. I'm happy to show any of you that need visual proof. I believe we'll take you at your word, Field Commander, Frida said in amusement. And the shifter? It took time, but she eventually agreed to give up information and help us, Hang informed. We've only learned a bit from her, but it's more than we would in years on our own. Assuming she is telling the truth, Sans remarked. Why do you believe she can be trusted? Pixis spoke up at that point. We are taking anything she says with a grain of salt. But the information is too dangerous to ignore if true. Dangerous? Caven asked with narrowed eyes. She confirmed that the colossal and armored titans are shifters, Erwin explained, and claims they and a third member infiltrated the walls. Her comrades? Frida asked with a head tilt. She says no, Erwin answered. I suppose that is why you're all here though, to judge if her information is worth the risk of keeping her alive. We are here to judge the creature as well, Pastor Nick said with a frown. I have already seen Eren with my own eyes, Pastor, Frida answered calmly. He has my vote. And I presume the vote of Commander Erwin and Commander Pixis. Vote? Hang questioned in surprise. Our judgment is a simple majority, 4 out of 6. If we deadlock, we either debate or return with an impasse for Zachary and the king to settle, Frida answered with a smile, looking to the other two. Caven, Sans, what are your thoughts? I'm not convinced he's not a Titan until I see him, Caven answered. That said, I don't really care what he is as long as I believe he isn't a threat. I'm skeptical, if only the claim that he knows nothing of what he is, Sans remarked. Frida smiled at the pastor. It was a cold smile. Well, I'm sure we'll all have an enlightening time when you all see him at the shifter's trial. What? Pastor Nick exclaimed. Sans raised an eyebrow but didn't protest while Caven scowled. Is that wise? I've already had an enlightening conversation with this Eren, Frida offered. But if any of you are too uncomfortable meeting him face to face. I have no fear of the enemies of the walls, Pastor Nick said under his breath. Good. Let us move on, Frida said with finality. Yes, well, I was going to bring up a point, Sans started, looking to the commanders. Both of these things came from the 104th. You claim there are more shifters among us, so wouldn't that be the first place to look? Pixis nodded. Indeed. We haven't had time to look into the backgrounds of any of them, but we also can't risk tipping them off before we know for certain whom they are. So that's your plan, do nothing? Caven asked, unimpressed. You haven't considered locking them up while you investigate? A grim silence came over the room. Oh, that is clever, Frida stated suddenly. Ichim? What do you mean what's clever? Nick asked in confusion. They've kept most, if not all of the surviving members of the 104th here, in Trost and near the Golden Creature. If you assume that he is a foe to the shifters and all evidence points to that, then they're essentially keeping all suspects in a pen with a rather potent attack dog, should they reveal their true nature, Frida elaborated. Sans blinked before turning thoughtful. It is a subtle prison, but it relies on trusting someone or something as unknown as this Eren Jaeger. If this is an absurdly deep deception on his part, Erwin started, then we've still kept all parties contained in the area of Trost. Eren being our enemy is our worst-case scenario. And what plans do you have for that? Pastor Nick asked sternly. If the beast shows its wicked nature, what are you prepared to do? Silence came over the room again. Well? Pastor Nick demanded. Nothing, Hang answered, blunt and stern. Eren is a complete unknown to us. His scales are too strong for our blades, and he recovered from the cannons with little issue. Our options for facing him are few and scarce. However, that just returns back to how senseless it would be for this to be a trick on his part. Senseless? Sans asked with a frown. You expect sense from our enemies? I believe she means enough sense that they aren't working against themselves, Frida mused. This Eren was able to block the breach in the wall. If he was working with the colossal and armored titan, that would work counter to their apparent goal. Moreover, after seeing him myself and reading the reports, I'm fairly sure he could force a hole through the inner gate if he tried as the armored titan did to Maria. Hang shared a glance with Erwin, who narrowed his eyes at the exchange. Frida, the crippled noblewoman, was very much the one leading the conversation. It would be admirable if it wasn't suspicious. She just hoped everything was going all right on Levi's end. Meanwhile, does the golden brat have issues with anyone? An awkward silence came over the group as they stared at the small captain. It was broken as Jean tilted back his head and laughed, while Connie and Sasha started snickering to themselves. What's so damn hilarious? Levi asked in a cold, sharp tone. Sasha and Connie went rigid while Jean got himself under control. Sorry, Captain, but it might be easier to list who that hothead didn't have problems with. Levi frowned, looking to Armin and Mikasa, who looked awkward at his gaze. Well, Armin started diplomatically. Eren's personality tends to clash with many people. Yeah, Eren's got a loud mouth on him, Reiner said with a grin. But I wouldn't sell him too short. Levi gave him a long stare. Reiner swallowed nervously. That wasn't a joke, sir, I swear. Right. Let me be more specific. The ones coming to judge him and the shifter are the noble lady from the other day, someone from the Wall Church, some government official I don't know about, and someone from the military police. Does your friend have a stick up his ass about any of the new three I should know about? Levi asked pointedly. Well, he doesn't like the military police on principle, but even I don't think he'd cause a scene just because they're here, Jean said with a shrug. Eren does take being a soldier seriously, Captain, Armin answered, several of the others nodding. That said, the Church of the Walls. You can't exactly blame him there, Annie stated. Being around them makes me want to vomit as it is. I know the feeling, Levi agreed. But is it anything to worry about? No, sir, Mikasa answered. In all the years I've known Eren, I've never known Eren to have any violent encounter with the Wallists. No one looked remotely skeptical of that, Armin nodding in confirmation. All right, good, Levi before taking a deep breath. Here comes the heavy part. Ackerman, tell them. Sir? She asked in surprise. He only stared at her before understanding dawned on her. All at once, she stood straighter before turning to her friends and comrades. About the night with the cannons? She told them everything. There wasn't much to tell, obviously, but it was enough. Something spoke through the wall? Armin repeated slowly. And it knew Eren's name? Well, that's a nightmare story if I ever heard one, Reiner grumbled to himself, Bertolt and Annie trying not to look too uncomfortable. No way. Another one? Connie said with a groan. Please tell me it's something friendly like trips? Levi hummed. We don't think a Titan, but we haven't caught sight of it yet. I doubt it's left yet. Great, another strange monster to worry about, Jean said, getting a dark look from Mikasa. I mean physically, not anything else, he defended quickly. Why are you telling us, sir? Sasha asked curiously. I mean, it doesn't sound like you know much about it? Because it's your responsibility to keep an eye on him. Not just for everyone else's sake, but his own as well. It won't do us a shit of good if you're all shocked when something new shows up, Levi answered simply. Don't spread this though. Consider it a gag order. It gets out that there's something out there, we're going to have more twitchy fingers on the wall, even if the cannons are pointed out. Everyone looked mildly grim at that. Paranoid people made stupid mistakes. Paranoid soldiers make stupid mistakes with weapons. Meanwhile, you assholes didn't say anything about this bullshit. Ymir's yell held as much anger as it did fear. Not because of the chains but of who they were on. What did you expect? Petra asked idly, attaching cuffs to Krista's left wrist and ankle, attaching each to those of Ymir's right. We can't exactly trust you, but we know you wouldn't harm her. Yeah, so basically if they decide to execute me I have to sit there and take it like a good bitch or kill Krista by transforming, Ymir summed up. Or if you try to turn on us, Krista stated neutrally. Ymir frowned at that, glancing at Petra. The scout sighed. There's still time until the trial. I'll give you two a minute. With that, they were left alone. Not really, Ymir was positive there were guards in earshot, but she'd settle for not having a visible audience. You know I won't, right? Ymir asked with a frown. No, I don't. I don't know anything apparently, Krista said with a snort. Ymir looked down, trying to keep the hurt from her voice and tone. You don't trust me. I trust you with my life, Krista answered immediately before sighing. Just not to tell me the truth. Ymir gently pushed her down to sit on the bed and leaned to her ear. I'll tell you anything. Krista frowned, glancing at her uncertainly. Ask me anything right here and now and I'll tell you, Ymir offered as a solemn vow. There were 1,001 things Krista wanted to ask, but she stopped. She considered. And only one question came to mind. What do I need to do for you to tell us everything? Ymir stared at her for a moment before smiling. Survive, Krista. If we're both alive once this trial is over, I promise I'll tell you everything. I'll tell them everything. Krista opened her mouth, only for Petra to knock on the bars as she entered. Sorry, but we can't put it off anymore. Krista cursed in her mind while Ymir sighed in resignation. Just answer me this, Is there a reason they're not just judging me in here where I'm safely locked behind a cell? Petra shrugged. They insisted on it for some reason. That's all I know. Emer frowned but didn't question further as she and Krista stood, heading out of the cell to face her literal judgment. She supposed she should be glad she was getting a trial at all. That was more than she got back in Marley. End of chapter. So yeah, Eren's playing matchmaker, the judges arrived, and the trial is officially going to start next chapter. Then the fun really begins. Happy Halloween, everyone. You weren't able to slip away? Reiner asked with a frown. Annie shook her head, not bothering to elaborate. And you too. Reiner glanced to Bertholdt, who frowned in disappointment. Ever since these judges showed up, they've been increasing security. Could they know about us? Annie asked quietly. I don't think so, Reiner answered. They're having a trial in Trost. Annie frowned. That sounds like bait. They're having it near the breach, Reiner clarified. Annie paused at that, cupping her chin in consideration. Bait, but perhaps not for us. That could be reinforcement for us though, right? Bertholdt reminded, almost desperate to be hopeful. Like we're that lucky, Annie remarked, unconvinced. Reiner held up his hand in thought. Wait, he has a point. Remember, they said that it was a voice calling for Jaeger. Annie blinked. That was a possibility, but it sounded strange the more she thought about it. You think Peak thought the war chief was in here? We don't know the situation out there, Reiner answered with his arms crossed. We know more than the devils, but we're in the same boat. We can't be certain what is out there. But we can agree that this trial is bait, Annie remarked. We need a plan. What do you mean? Bertholdt asked. Shouldn't we just lie low until they let their guard down? Ideally, Annie answered. But if things go south or we see a chance, we need to have a plan to take it. If anything else shows up, we let it play out, Reiner stated. If the unknown thing outside the wall isn't with us, we can have Bertholdt transform on them at point blank. Hopefully that'll kill one of them and make it easier for me and Annie to deal with anything else. But that would mean blowing our cover, Bertholdt reminded uncertainly. Annie massaged her temple. We have to start considering the possibility that the coordinates are compromised. Reiner looked at her in bewilderment. Eren, the lack of reaction to Maria and Trost, everything. Maybe the royal family doesn't have the founder anymore, Annie pointed out grimly. Regardless, information about something like Eren is almost as valuable as the coordinates. The knowledge that there might be more creatures to challenge Titans in this world. Reiner nodded reluctantly. We'll see how this plays out and plan from there. As it is, we're just worrying ourselves in circles. All else fails and we have to escape, we can probably capture Emer. And a flashback. That was all pretty easy to say and think in private. Tail? Many soldiers instinctively ducked down or knelt as the giant end of a tail passed overhead. It wouldn't have hit any of them if they hadn't dodged, but better safe than sorry. Watch it, Scales. You'll poke someone's eye out with those. Reiner called after the golden behemoth in jest, getting a look from the leftmost head. He swore that head of Eren's grinned at him. Reiner chuckled before allowing a troubled frown to form over his face. There was one upside to the prospect of fighting Eren in this form. Everything he and the others had taught their fellow cadet wouldn't translate well to a body without arms. But that was a small mercy. There was no way of telling just how durable Eren's body would be against hardened strikes from him and Annie, or how much damage Eren's fangs could do against them in turn. Come on, Reiner. The blonde warrior shook his head as he caught sight of a grinning Connie. You don't want to miss the show, do you? The show, that was one thing to call it. The soldiers gathered atop and around the most undamaged buildings across from the sealed breach. There, several were fashioning some kind of pole into the ground. It was a testament to recent events that they didn't pay much mind to the giant beast looming nearby, watching the bustling of activity with mild interest. But it was obvious he was glancing at the boulder every now and again. Or maybe the cannons atop the walls. They were all taking aim at the area where, to Reiner's understanding, Emer would be restrained for her trial. But he was sure a few up there was watching the scaled creature too. Geez, they're having it all the way out here? Connie mused with a confused look. Isn't that a bit dangerous? You know, with the shifter? Probably just some symbolic bull, judging her before the boulder and all that, Reiner answered casually as he studied the area. Connie was right though. It was an obvious point, why give the prisoner more of a chance to escape? Even if it was just to project an image, it didn't feel right. Was it just really obvious bait like they had thought? Regardless, there wasn't much to be concerned about. Their swords and cannons couldn't breach his armor. Bertholdt could get rid of most of them just by transforming. Annie was a bit of a concern, but if the situation got too dicey for her, she could just lay low without shifting, maybe act as a surprise attack. Still, seeing Eren looking at the boulder, Reiner was sure of one thing. The story about a voice beyond the wall wasn't some elaborate lie. It was unlikely to begin with, but Eren seemed too genuine in his worry to be faking it. His eyes scanned the area once more, picking out where every one of his fellow cadets was. Bertholdt and Armin were on buildings closer to where the trial would be. Annie was across the clearing, the other side of things with Marco. Jean was keeping an eye on Sasha off to the side, closer to the wall. Mikasa. Where was Mikasa? He couldn't see her, and that scarf was usually a great way to pick her out. That gave him some worry. His only guess was that she was somewhere up on the wall. Either that or... Meanwhile, Ymir felt no shame in admitting it to herself. Being escorted to her trial by Mikasa de Ackerman was more than a little intimidating. Oh sure, she wasn't the only one along for the ride. The soldiers had loaded Ymir and Krista into the back of a cart, still chained together. And right across from them was Mikasa. The silence only made it tenser. Ymir knew that the girl was dangerous, and everyone did. But with Eren Yeager dead, Ymir wasn't sure what Mikasa was capable of. All the same. You got a relative? Ymir asked bluntly. Krista blinked at the random question while Mikasa frowned. My parents are dead. Not what I meant, Ymir retorted. You kind of remind me of the shrimp. The shrimp? You mean Captain Levi? Mikasa took a guess. Did she almost smile? Ymir swore she almost smiled. Yeah. There's a bit in the face, but you're both scary bastards with swords and you kind of talk the same. Sometimes. It's the tone, Ymir rambled. Not that I know of, Mikasa answered with a shrug. Right, Ymir acknowledged. So, if they decide I'm not worth keeping, what happens? They shoot me, or does the big guy just eat me alive? Hey, keep it down back there, one of the soldiers snapped, riding nearby on horseback. The silence returned. Obviously, they don't want you talking about the trial before we get there, Krista said with a sigh. You know, so you don't try to escape? Ymir grimaced. Sorry, right. Just trying to make small talk. If it makes you feel any better, I don't think he cares about holding a grudge, Mikasa stated. He's more concerned with whose side you're on. He. Ymir repeated before shaking her head. Right, three heads. I almost forgot that thing can understand us. I'm guessing you've all been trying to talk with him? Mikasa raised a single brow before glancing to Krista. The blonde tilted her head neutrally. They didn't want me telling Ymir everything. Mikasa hummed. Most around here believe him, I think. Ymir snorted in amusement. Irony. I look human, but everyone's ready to chop my head off. He's a giant monster, but it seems like a lot are on his bandwagon. Mikasa glared ever so slightly. Krista cleared her throat. To be fair, they haven't seen a lot of reasons to trust you yet, Ymir. Yeah. An interesting and important choice of words. Ymir said nothing to that. It was true after all. So, you here to kill me if I act up? Yes. Mainly if you kill Krista first, Mikasa answered with cold indifference. It was Ymir's turn to glare. Can you both stop talking like I'm not here, please? Krista requested awkwardly. Sorry, Ymir said, glancing away. So, Mikasa, what's everyone else been saying about me? We haven't really talked about you much, Mikasa answered. Ymir snorted. Guess the golden bastard got priority, she mused. The rest of the ride turned to silence as they rode through Trost. Ymir narrowed her eyes as they went. She couldn't hear anything or feel anything. The giant lizard should be impossible to hide, every step shaking the ground, which meant he was either far away or standing still, or both. A faint, reptilian call filled the air, far away then. He's getting impatient, Krista murmured offhandedly. Ymir raised an eyebrow as she glanced at Mikasa Ag. She definitely saw a small smile that time. Mikasa had set her face to neutral fast enough, but Ymir was sure of it. It felt like hours, but Ymir was sure the ride took only 10-15 minutes at most to get to the other end of Trost. They came to the clear area just before the breach, and there was the golden wonder in all his gilded glory. His green eyes fixed on them almost instantly. Ymir swallowed and tore her gaze away, knowing it would just unnerve her to watch the six eyes watching her. There were soldiers all over the place, the ground, the roofs, and the walls. And the cannons were pointed this way. The commanders were here too, with some people she didn't recognize. And just beyond them was a pole driven into the stones with restraints on it. Lovely. This is our trial too. That was something Eren realized as he awaited for the defendant to arrive. This whole trial was some sort of presentation. Soldiers working calmly with him nearby, a threat to no one, No one save any prisoner trying to escape. It was a good idea, he supposed. Ignoring that they knew who he was, there was no denying his intelligence at this point, and showing he could be trusted to act as a guard to deal with Ymir should be decent proof for any that were still skeptical of him. We just need to pretend the cannons aren't pointed at us too. They're not going to shoot us. How do you know? They could hit the commanders and the others. Shut up, both of you. You're making the priest uneasy. All three heads tried to be as casual and unobvious as possible when they all glanced toward the pastor in question. Of the group around Frida, he found only Pastor Nick a bother. The other two were on edge, but the wall zealot looked ready to spit venom but was keeping his words to himself. For now. Everything grew quiet, the soldiers becoming still while eyeing a nearby street. She's here. Zwei suppressed the urge to snarl as the cart came into view, the freckled cadet sitting in a wagon that held also Krista and Mikasa. That made it all the harder for the middle head to keep his ire from showing. On a purely practical level, he didn't care about Ymir attacking him. If it was a misunderstanding, it was a misunderstanding. What she might be able to tell them about Titans was fundamentally more important. He knew that he did. Logically. But emotionally? You want to take another bite out of her. You're not helping. Don't worry, I do too. That's why you're not helping. And you don't? Of course I do. But there's a damn time and place. And it's not now. Still, as Eren watched, he couldn't help feeling like something was off about all of this. Something didn't feel right, not since he laid eyes on Ymir. There were no words spoken to Ymir as she was led to the pole by Levi of all people, along with Krista, still chained to her. The shifter sighed as she knelt and allowed her arms to be bound to the iron. Fine there, can you unchain her now? Ymir asked gruffly. Shut it, Levi answered, nodding to Krista. Ymir tensed as she felt Krista kneeling behind her, so they were back to back with the rod between them. What's going on? Ymir stuttered in shock. They want me here for the whole trial, Krista answered under her breath. Damn it. None of you better get trigger happy up there. Ymir barked out. You're not exactly helping your case. Ymir's eyes turned to meet the gaze of... She froze. She was older and her hair was black, but that face was... It was almost Krista's. I'm Frida Rice, she introduced. And you are Cadet Ymir of the 104th, correct? Assuming that is her real name, a sullen-looking man remarked beside her. Yeah, that's my name, Ymir answered, swallowing thickly. I'm guessing you're my judges then? I suppose we are, Frida remarked. Before we start anything, I think we should give you a chance to state your intentions. Ymir stared pointedly, the air tense. Frida glanced in the direction of Erwin and Pixis over her shoulder. Regardless of everything else, the commanders say they have convinced you to work in the interest of the people of the walls. Ymir narrowed her eyes. That wording, the people of the walls. Not humanity. Well, that dismissed most of her doubts. Is that true, Ymir? Frida questioned. Ymir firmed her lip. It is. Frida's smile widens minutely. Excellent. Now dash. A low, ominous growl silenced them all. Every eye turned to the golden beast, whose gaze was intensely focused on Ymir. But his eyes were wide and trembling. I thought you said he was under control? Pastor Nick hissed to the commanders. Pixis frowned and Erwin was unfazed, but neither of them answered as they observed the heads. The middle was still fixated on Ymir, but the other two were looking back and forth as if lost and unfocused. Mikasa gripped the handle of her sword tightly, resisting the urge to run out and figure out what was wrong. Krista, the fuck is up with him? Ymir asked quietly. Krista could only watch Eren with her own bewildered concern. I don't know. He's just mumbling. It can't be, there's no way. It's like he's in shock. Ymir started and paled as eyed the creature, realizing that it was starting to panic. And that middle head was staring at her intently. She didn't know how, but... Fuck. You figured it out? What are you talking about? Krista asked, but Ymir didn't answer as she watched the situation grimly. Trips. Calm down. Armin called out, standing on the edge of the roof closest to Eren. Dre's head darted up and Armin felt something freeze in his throat, that terrible, awful look in Eren's eyes. It was sad, it was confused, yet there was rage building behind it. Armin hadn't seen a look like that since the fall of Wall Maria, the death of Eren's mother. Something had happened, something only Eren had noticed, and his friend looked ready to attack. Whatever it was. It's okay, Armin said, even if it wasn't. He needed everyone to think it was. Just, calm down, you're scaring everyone. No one here is your enemy. He's right, Scales. Absolutely everyone saw how the three-headed creature stiffened. Everyone except the speaker. Just tone it down a bit. The three heads turned numb, disbelieving orbs to the speaker. Reiner blinked as Eren's eyes converged on him, the slits narrowed and piercing. Oh, right. That's how it is, Reiner whispered absently to himself, his shoulders slumped. Armin looked at him warily. Reiner? Is something wrong? Yeah. Eren's a pain in the ass as usual, Reiner said with a fond sigh. Always making things more complicated. Reiner, Armin said slowly, suspiciously. We're supposed to call him Trips, remember? Even with his back turned, Armin was very aware of Eren's leftmost head looming protectively behind him. Right. Sorry, Armin. Guess I'm just not cut out for this kind of stuff, Reiner remarked meaningfully. If there's a problem we can talk about it, Armin offered, sweat forming on his brow. Reiner sighed. Sorry, Armin, but sometimes there's nothing to talk about, he said, rubbing the back of his head. Sometimes we have to act. As soldiers. He narrowed his gaze, glaring back at the reptilian head. And as warriors. Before anyone could react, Reiner grabbed a knife from his belt and slashed his hand. Thunder filled the sky. By the walls. Pastor Nick cried out in alarm as the wind bellowed around them. Shit. So they were here, Hang cursed with gritted teeth. Hey Shrimpy. Mind unchaining me? Emer yelled from her spot. Everyone watched with grimness or horror as, on the side of the building, a titan formed. Not just any though. The armored titan, his grate shielded from caving through the roof and wall. It's him? We were right. But how? Why? It's been them this whole time. All these years, everything. I can't believe it. You damn, vile, lying, traitors? Einz trembled with rage, mouth snarling. Zwei stared on with cold wrath and disbelief. Dre. Reiner swore that head looked ready to scream and cry. The armor titan had waited for the trembling, wrathful lizard to make the first move. He wasn't disappointed. With a roar of hate and rage, Eren lunged at the armor titan, mouth open and teeth ready to snare his foe. Reiner punched the rightmost head in the snout, but that barely stalled it as all three mouths latched onto him and slammed him through the building. The nearest soldiers had cleared the area the moment the lighting fell and the enemy titan began to appear, to avoid being caught in the fighting. What's going on? Pastor Nick cried out in panic. A battle, obviously, Caven remarked obviously. Sans was tensed, ready to dodge or run, but didn't flee in terror. You all should evacuate behind the wall, Pixis said calmly, watching intently as their giant ally managed to keep the enemy titan pinned. The rest of you go, Frida said with a sigh, limping over to take a seat on a nearby crate. I think I'll just rest here. Ma'am, this is serious, we need to move. Anka said urgently. Frida just sat there with a tired smile as she watched the fight go on. If that is your decision, Erwin stated with a look at Frida before turning to the others. I'll escort these two back to safety, Caven said, watching cautiously as she led Nick and Sans away. The scouts will secure Emer, Erwin said to Pixis, who nodded as he used his maneuver gear to get to a less hazardous spot. Erwin looked back to Frida. Did you have a plan? Frida sighed heavily as if two giant monsters weren't battling before her. Yes, we did. There was emptiness between the two, a silent agreement that there would be explanations later. Levi, Erwin called. Already on it, Levi answered as he hurried to get Emer unbound from the pole. About time, Shrimp. Emer called, watching as the fight got way too close for her liking. Levi's hand snapped to his weapon as another figure dropped down in front of them, but paused as he saw it was Armin. A very slimy Armin. Emer. Emer, he called desperately. You survived that close to him? Emer asked in shock. Thanks to Eren, yeah, Armin said as he caught his breath. Emer blinked. Eren? She repeated before smirking. Thought there was something familiar about the golden bastard. Look, there's no time for that. If Reiner is the armored, then that means the others have to be. Armin looked at her imploringly, knowing the truth but needing confirmation. Yeah, it's Annie and Berthold, Emer admitted quickly as her cuffs came loose. Now you talk, Levi said with a scowl. Berthold? Annie? Boo, but how did Eren know? Krista asked in shock as she dragged herself up. Who cares? We need to shit. Emer cursed as she looked to the battle. Reiner's titan managed to kick one of the heads off his side, giving him a chance to pull his way out of the building, Eren's teeth scrapping deep into his armor with a horrendous sound. The armored titan's path nearly led to the four of them getting stepped on. Emer scooped Krista into her arms and started to run away as Levi and Armin escaped on their ODM gear. Eren roared wrathfully as he tried to bite at Reiner again with one of his heads, but the armored titan jabbed him under the chin. It didn't hurt, but it was enough to knock the mouth closed. Reiner wasn't going to let him trap him so easily. But he was acutely aware that the fangs had dug into his armor. Not all the way, but against Eren he wasn't impenetrable. Another sustained attack like that and his golden foe might breach the hardening. The unique ability of his own titan was reduced to a temporary defense now. Reiner glanced past his foe and wondered where Annie was. Bertholdt was waiting for the right moment, obviously, but he thought Annie would have joined the fight by now. He heard the hiss of gas as blades broke against his armor. Reiner looked in surprise, seeing Mikasa landing nearby. The look on her face was almost as terrifying as Eren's. Her attack did no damage, but Eren didn't let the distraction slip away. Ainz burst forth and bit into the Titan's lower leg. Reiner struggled to keep his balance, lest he be pulled off his feet again. He raised a fist to strike at the head, but Zwei trapped that arm in his maw as well. "Damn it, Eren," Reiner growled as his free hand struck the middle head in the one vulnerable spot Reiner knew of. The green eye went wide as an armored fist buried into it, black blood gushing forth. Eren screamed in pain, all three heads, but Ainz and Zwei only latched onto him harder. Dre did as well before he brought his head down, head-butting the armored titan in the head. A great crack filled the air, the armor on the head of the titan beginning to fracture and flake off as the armored titan fell once more. Amazing. Amazing, amazing. Hang all but gushed as she watched the battle unfold, her cheeks flushed ever so slightly. Eren. So this is what it's like watching you fight. Section Commander. Please move back. You're too close. Moblit called urgently. How can I move back, Moblit, from such a perfect view? Hang asked with a grin, eyes never leaving the scene. For just a second, she sobered up. Besides, he might need our help if more of our enemies show up. The distinct sound of gunshots rang through the air, causing Hang to look off across the open space in surprise. Then, just as with the armored titan, a lightning bolt fell from the heavens. And there formed another titan. A new one with blonde hair and a rather distinctive form. Well, those are definitely breasts, Hang remarked with a narrowed gaze. Looks like the female titan has arrived. End of chapter. Well, bet you all weren't expecting that to kick off like it did. Yep, this whole trial was always going to turn into a big battle. Now Eren is in pure rage mode, and blew the cover for our Marleyan trio. To anyone that didn't figure it out, I showed a bit ago that Erendra can see auras around living things, and that the warrior trio had unique ones. Eren saw Emer for the first time since Battle of Trost, and noticed hers was the same as theirs. 3 + 1 is 4, and Eren realized his friends are shifters. Hope you all enjoyed this. And Merry Christmas. Annie didn't know what happened, but she could guess. Eren figured it out, he could tell what they were. It didn't matter how he could, just that he did. And that he was fighting Reiner. And Reiner wasn't faring too well. She was very aware of the soldiers around her. If she transformed now, she could take them out. But if she didn't, if she made a break for it, she might get a surprise attack on Eren. But Eren was in such a frenzy, he might not notice her transforming before she actually attacked. Her mind made up, she ready to draw the hidden blade on her ring. Click. Her eyes went wide as she heard the telltale sound of a gun ready to fire. Pivoting on her heel and arching her head low, she kicked at her would-be killer, cracking the jaw with a sickening crack. Without thinking, she jumped off the rooftop, taking off with a burst of gas. "You damn bitch," another cried out before opening fire. As did others. Annie hissed as she felt the bullet run through her chest. In the haze between activating the transformations and her titan forming, she vaguely registered what this meant. Their cover had already been blown. Eren hadn't been the only one to figure it out. It didn't matter, not right now. Lightning touched her, flesh formed around her, and her titan landed on her feet. Turning to the clash of Eren and Reiner, she saw the armored titan fall with a great crash. She didn't have much time before the soldiers reacted and took the chance she had. She rushed to her golden foe in a dead sprint. Ainz and Zwei were still keeping the struggling Reiner off his feet. Dre was about to make a bite towards the neck. He didn't hear or feel the ground-shaking steps, but his eyes snapped toward the rushing mass in the corner of his vision. A titan, an enemy. Nothing else registered, his tail swinging to strike her. But the female titan was too close now, sidestepping before leaping to give a strike to Dre's head. Annie's only regret was not hardening her knuckles. If not for the tails, she would have. The leftmost head growled in pain and fury before turning towards the new foe. Annie? If he hadn't known beforehand, he never would have guessed, might have never noticed the similarities. The blonde hair, the sharp blue eyes. But that fighting stance? Who else could it be but Annie? The wound of betrayal refreshed itself as he turned and, with a great heave, he threw one traitor at another. Annie expertly dodged Reiner's armored body as Eren glowered down hatefully at her. She could see it in his eyes, wrath that would literally tear her apart, limb from limb. There was only an instance of pause before his mouth opened. Trying not to give him a chance to act, Annie struck forth, and Eren roared, "I'll wipe you out." He roared loud and hard right in her face. Annie found herself abandoning her attack, as pure agony suddenly coursed through her head. Every last one. She fell to her knees as blood rushed from her ears, both her human and Titan form. She clutched them, trying to block out that terrible sound, Eren's hateful roar. From this world? She forced herself to look up, teeth gritted as she met his gaze. Meanwhile, "Thank God he stopped," Ymir said with a groan, leaning against the wall, clutching her head as she looked to Krista. She froze as she saw Krista clutching her skull. Hey, are you okay?" she asked in concern and bewilderment. "I can hear him," Krista answered with a pained grimace. "I can hear everything he's yelling at them." "That bad?" Ymir asked as they stood in the alley. "It's like it's right in my ears still," Krista answered as she pulled her hands down. "What do we do?" Their eyes met. "I'm not going to try and run away," Ymir promised, holding up their still cuffed hands. "But Shrimpy didn't have enough time to get our cuffs off. And I can't transform with you this close. So we need to find a way to get this off," Krista summarized. "Well, that or something too." She paused uncomfortably. "Cut my hand off." "Why Dash?" Krista looked at her in shock. "Why would Dash? Are you Dash?" "Look, it'll hurt like a bitch, but I can regrow a hand, okay?" Ymir explained with a sigh. Oh, Krista said in stunned understanding, trying to ignore the sounds and vibrations of the battle. "Well, if we have to dash, I think I can save you some pain and blood there." Krista started at the voice while Ymir turned, protectively placing the smaller cadet behind her. A man was walking down the alley with ODM gear. But there was something weird about it to Krista. There weren't any blades, just metal cylinders where they should be stored. He tipped his hat up and smirked at Ymir. "Still on edge, Frex?" "Oh, it's you, geezer," Ymir said with a sigh, just a bit relieved. "Ymir, you know him?" Krista asked, stepping out beside her. The man smirked. "Good you're still alive. Friedevie had my hide if something happened to your blonde head." Krista blinked. "Me? Wait." She stopped and squinted. "Kenny? Still kicking, farm girl?" Kenny asked with a smirk. Now it was Ymir's turn to be surprised. "Wait, you two know each other?" "We met once," he remarked with a shrug. "That's one way of putting it," Krista agreed tentatively, giving him a suspicious look. "What happened to me keeping a quiet life? Change in plans. Your girlfriend here and I had a little talk about why she should work for us," Kenny explained, nodding to Ymir. "When did Dash?" Krista stopped and sighed. "We don't have time for this." "Can you do something about this?" she asked, holding up their shackled wrists. "That I can," he answered, holding up one of his weapons. "Just pull him apart. No need for either of you to be losing a limb over this." Both girls did as he said, eyeing the barrel cautiously as he aimed it at the chain between them. With a pull of the trigger, both of their ears were ringing. "Walls, that is loud," Ymir exclaimed, reaching up to rub her left ear. With a scowl, she looked at Kenny as he reloaded his gun. "What now?" "You should probably join the fight or keep an eye out for a good chance. Make you look good to everyone else," Kenny suggested. "I got to make sure our little princess makes it out of this alive." Ymir glanced skeptically between the two before Krista spoke up. "Ymir, go." "I'll be fine," Krista assured firmly. "Right," Ymir accepted begrudgingly. "Just watch yourself, Frex," Kenny advised, glancing up at the darkening skies. "Storms a-brewin'." Meanwhile, Erwin observed the battle stoically. The armored titan was still down. He had been getting up until Eren's stunning roar was let loose. Now he was collapsed again, either out cold or just unable to move. "Finish it, Trips. Kill her already. You got her right where you want her." Eren had the female titan pinned, face down with his foot talons digging into her back. However, despite several attempts, he hadn't been able to bite through her nape. "Erwin." He glanced to the side as Levi approached. "Ymir and Krista?" "Almost got squashed, but alive," Levi answered pointedly. Erwin picked up the extra meaning. They weren't in their custody. What should we do? Levi inquired, looking out as the armor titan got back to its feet. Eren wasn't blind to this either, Ainz snarling before reaching down to snap his jaw onto the back of Annie's neck, trying to either bite through or crush his foe within. Reiner, seeing his comrade in danger, made into a sloppy charge, leaping and tackling at the golden reptile. With Annie pushing from underneath him, Eren found himself knocked onto his side. The hardened nape of the female's neck was ripped away though, torn from her unhardened flesh and crumbling in the fanged maw. Briefly, Annie's human form was exposed before her titan's hands concealed her while her titan healed. Reiner was guarding Annie in case any of the soldiers tried to attack in her moment of weakness. Erwin summarized that the female titan had the ability to make her skin stronger, like the armor titans, but it seems to be temporary. Otherwise, why not use it all the time? There's still a third enemy in hiding, Erwin reminded warily. Levi frowned. Emer said it was Berthold. Hoover the tall one, Erwin recalled. Eren can handle either of these. Maybe both of them. But the third is the Colossal, Levi stated in understanding. Eren snarled as he tried to roll back onto his feet, slowed slightly by his lack of arms. Seeking to return the favor from earlier, Reiner ran forward to grab Eren's left leg, keeping it off the ground. Eren growled dangerously. His other leg was too short and at a bad angle to swipe at Reiner. His left tail was too close. Was the right one though? Annie didn't give him the chance to try. Or at least that was her intent as raced forward. Until someone tried to cut the tendons behind her ankles. Jumping just in time, Annie found herself being swarmed by ODM-equipped soldiers. While the female titan cursed her luck, Armin landed just in front of Eren's form. Eren, focus on Reiner. Let them worry about Annie, Armin advised. The golden beast looked back at the fight between humans and titans. Annie wasn't armored. She was vulnerable to their blades. As Armin cleared the area, Eren grinned 3 savage grins as his right tail slammed into Reiner, mashing the armored titan between his scales and the weapon upon his tail. And again and again. Damn it, Eren. Reiner cursed to himself. He had tried to break the leg or even just dislocate it, but his titan wasn't strong enough. It took everything he had just to keep Eren from jerking the leg free. Snarling in frustration, Eren tilted his body, rolling in the opposite direction. Caught in surprise, Reiner was nearly pulled over before he released Eren, who partially slammed into a building as a result of his body roll. With a dissatisfied TSK, Reiner made a quick retreat to help his ally against her enemies. Eren shook the debris off his back as he stood back up, eyes instantly finding his foes once more. He froze as he saw Reiner crush a soldier in his hands, Annie breaking someone's spine as she yanked them by their wires. They were slaughtering the soldiers, crushing them like bugs. Maggots? His rage renewed with an icy fuel to it, he snarled and ready to attack them once more. Reiner's armor was becoming more of a spider web of damage. Just a bit more and he could put him down, and then Annie. And then Berthold and whoever else he had to kill. He charged the pair, the soldiers dispersing to dodge. The shifters, knowing they had little other option, charged him as well. Reiner tried to strike the rightmost head dead on, but Ainz moved to the side, his horn scrapping and sparking against Reiner's arm as he pushed past to bite his foe in the side. Annie, however, leaped to Eren's left and brought a hardened heel kick into his eye. Dre screamed as blood burst from the optical organ, destroyed but already starting to regenerate. Or it would have been if Annie hadn't used the momentum of her own spin to quickly strike with an open fist, her hardened fingers going right into Dre's destroyed eye. Dre screamed as Annie's digits stabbed into his brain. Ainz bit harder into Reiner, more out of pain than rage, while Dre let out what sounded like a dying groan, his head falling limp. Annie attempted to free herself but found her hand actually stuck in the skull itself, as if it somehow had her in a death grip. Zwei hissed murderously while biting into the offending arm. Desperate, Annie hardened her other hand, hoping to take 2 heads out. You bitch. Get away from him. That was the only warning Annie got as Mikasa sliced her ankle tendons, and Hang cut through the fingers, below where the digits had hardened. Both women had equally dark looks on their faces as Annie fell to her knees. Eren's head awkwardly, painfully ripped the arm out of his other head's eye. Everything felt strange. Partially, painfully numb. 3 heads or not, a stab to the brain was painful. With deep breaths, Zwei lurched over and grabbed the struggling Reiner by the shoulder. With his 2 remaining heads, he slammed the armor titan into the female, laying them on top of each other. Quickly he placed a foot on Reiner's back, trying to keep him pinned. He was only half aware of his surroundings now, trying to acclimate to the pain of a dead brain. He couldn't keep them pinned long. And in his absent haze, he had pinned them with Annie on her back. Getting to her nap wouldn't be easy. And Reiner wouldn't stop squirming. He froze as thunder once more rang through the air, the bolt coming down just meters away from them. To his surprise, it was not the enormous colossal that appeared before him. It was the Jaw Titan. It was Ymir's Titan. The smaller shifter was coming towards them. Hey! Zwei was suddenly aware that Levi was on his head. When he got there he wasn't sure. Don't get bite happy. She's supposed to be on our side now, remember? Levi reminded cautiously. Supposed to be, Eren was acutely aware of. Still, he heeded the captain's words, letting the Titan approach. Hold him, Ymir growled out, snapping her jaws. Bite him out. Could she do that? Zwei wanted to know, moving his mouth to latch onto Reiner's arms and keep him pinned. Annie started to struggle again and must have tried something because Levi swooped by, faster than the eye could catch, and sliced out the female Titan's eyes. Ymir climbed up on the two bodies, and Eren was suddenly very much aware that Ymir was once more in biting distance of both his necks. Not a sentiment he enjoyed, but he was rewarded with the almost metallic sound of Ymir biting into the nape of the armored Titan. It was already fractured, allowing her to take it apart in 3 full bites. Reiner struggled more and Eren could feel Annie kicking uselessly while attempting to get free. Before Ymir could go for the finishing bite, Annie let loose a loud, feral wail. It was more desperate than rage, the echo of her screams reverberating out as violent winds. Come. Eren blinked. He could understand that scream, Annie's scream. How, he wasn't sure, but what was Annie calling out to? Eren. Right. Between the pain and rage he had forgotten. With much effort, Zwei managed to see him off to the side. There stood Bertholdt on a rooftop, holding a sword to Armin's throat. Let them go right now or I slit his throat. Bertholdt screamed out desperately. Eren, don't do it, dash. Armin tried to plead before Bertholdt roughly covered his mouth. Do you really want his blood on your hands, Eren? Bertholdt threatened, pulling the blade just enough to draw blood. Armin. Eren faintly heard Mikasa call out in alarm. Ymir, seeing the standoff, hesitated. With how Eren could be, she knew he might just attack her if she endangered Armin's life. Eren growled into his bites. He wouldn't give up Armin so easily, but he could at least buy everyone time. Bertholdt was about to yell again when he saw the injured, downed head of Eren raise up with unsteady and wobbly motions. He stared on with an uneasy expression as he looked into the one eye that remained on it. The bright green was now dull, empty, and lifeless. The head twitched and seized before. The eye blinked. Bertholdt, and many others, were slightly disgusted as the orange goop that came with Eren's regenerations was suddenly vomited forth from the head, covering the ground. Dre shook himself stiffly, flexing his jaw as his gaze came in and out of focus before he stared directly at Bertholdt. With both eyes, the other now healed. Obviously along with his brain. Okay, Bertholdt muttered uneasily before calling out again. Now let them go. Both of them. Armin was still trying to shake his head, silently begging Eren not to let their enemy slip away. Dre looked pained and not physically as he stared at his endangered friend. Eren. Ymir. He blinked in surprise at the call, his middle head lurching around to stare at Frida. She was still sitting on her box as if it were a front row seat to a show. She smiled at him mysteriously, cupping her hand to her mouth. It's fine. Make the trade. What? Lady, are you crazy? Someone yelled, possibly Jean. Still, she just smiled. Eren suddenly wasn't sure whose side she was on, but was there a plan here? Something he didn't know about? While some of the soldiers were voicing their disapproval, he didn't notice any of the commanders among them. If Bertholdt lying and he killed Armin no matter what, then Eren would he'd just go back to killing them. And he'd know not to trust them next time they tried taking hostages. With hostile uncertainty, Eren released Reiner and stepped back. Ymir leaped to Eren's side, both of them eyeing the Titans as Reiner quickly got to his feet, raising his fists into a defensive stance as Annie rolled into a crouch. One of her eyes was healed and her ankles just finished as she slowly got to her feet. While the other heads watched them, Dre looked to Bertholdt as if daring him to break their agreement. The tall teen frowned, realizing the dangerous position he found himself in. It's not like if he let Armin go they were just going to all walk away. Kill Armin and Eren would attack, which might be what he needed to do, bait Eren into getting too close. Or should he transform now? It was slim, but Bertholdt knew there was a chance that Eren could kill him before he had a chance to transform. Not to mention the soldiers he was sure were creeping closer to his location. If he transformed now, he could still just attack Eren as the Colossal. No matter how strange a creature the three-headed beast was, it couldn't handle something as overpowering as a 60-meter titan. Don't suppose you're any more willing to talk about this? Armin asked with a bitter smile. Bertholdt brought the blade away just a bit because his hand trembled. I'm sorry, Armin, but there's nothing to say, Bertholdt apologized. So, all this time was? Armin trailed off sadly. We had to. We had no choice, Bertholdt said, more to himself than his hostage. That's just the way this world is. Does it have to be? Armin asked, disappointed. Yes, Bertholdt responded, closing his eyes for an instant to steady himself. How can you be sure if you won't even tell us why you're doing this? Armin challenged. If you won't even try? Bertholdt went still. Whatever he might have said was silenced by the sounds of cannon fire. Eren let out a growl of alarm as he looked to the walls, heads jolting away from potential cannonballs. Reiner moved in front of Annie as a shield while Ymir stayed crouched in Eren's shadow. But all grew confused and tense as they realized the cannonballs weren't being shot into Trost but beyond the wall. There was screaming too from up there, faint as it was with the explosions. Eren glanced at all three of his enemies and found them all confused. As was Ymir and everyone else he could see. Except for Frida, her smile more amused than anything now. Zwei eyed her suspiciously before all three heads growled low in his throats. Eren realized what was happening. Their mystery guest was making a move. The cannon stopped and soldiers could be seen fleeing from the walls as something emerged and climbed over the top of the wall. It was 10 meters high, give or take, but the strangest thing about it was its limbs. It had only 2 limbs that were more like arms than legs, its elbows each forming into a large spike. From its back was a long tail and from the neck a long snout head. Like a reptile's, but the texture almost made the head look like it was just a skull without skin or flesh. Its body was dark gray and scaly, with a crimson line going down its head, spine and tail. No one dared to move, watching the new party as it looked over the battle, its gaze settling on the three-headed beast. Eren eyed it warily, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what he was even looking at. Then the creature opened its wide mouth and bellowed one word over Trost. One name, clear as crystal. Jaeger. Stunned silence washed over Trost, not even the wind daring to make a sound. Until the two-legged monster leaped off of the wall, its 3-clawed feet digging into the massive structure, slowing its descent. Shit, it can climb, Levi muttered, both blades at the ready as he watched the unknown party. Halfway down, it pushed off the wall, crashing down onto the roof of the nearest building. The hell is that now? Connie screamed, having dodged from its landing point. He watched it as it shrugged off the force of the fall, and was already running across the rooftops at frightening speeds, with an almost serpentine movement to it. Everyone watched in dread and anticipation as it raced towards the square, Eren tensing and preparing to face whatever had just crawled up to seek him out. Reaching the last house, it gave a mighty leap across the opening, and barreled towards the pair of titans. Reiner cursed his luck as the strange thing jumped at him. He raised his fists to block it, but its fingers grasped onto his limbs and effortlessly swung itself around to his back. His hands quickly reached up to cover his nap. Annie struck at the skull and, to her shock, found herself breaking her titan's hand. It turned to her, looking right at her with sunken eyes as its mouth opened and spoke. Dogs of Marley. Annie and Reiner froze in shock, and it cost them. A very long tongue lunged out, grabbing the offending arm and dragging it into the mouth. She tried to pull herself free, but the creature allowed itself to be brought along, its tail wrapping around the armored titan's neck and dragging him to the ground as a result. Eren watched the fight, his shock turning to fascination. Then something darkly satisfying settled in him. Now it was 3-on-3. His 6 eyes drifted to the one issue, Bertholdt. What the hell? Another one? Just how many monsters do you devils have? Bertholdt whispered in disbelief. Seizing the moment, Armin took the chance to elbow Bertholdt, striking him right between the legs. The shifter let out a silent scream of surprise and pain as Armin was able to pull himself free without further injury. He seethed in frustration as he saw the small blonde escape on his ODM gear. Eren, seeing the opening, made a dead sprint toward Bertholdt. Feeling the tremors before he even looked, the tall teen grimaced as he took off on his ODM gear. But not to flee. He flew right towards his foe. Time slowed for Bertholdt as he stared into those 3 maws of deadly teeth, all ready to devour him, to destroy him. If Bertholdt didn't destroy him first. He closed his eyes and focused on the scratch he had made on his hand, waiting until he could feel the breaths, the jaws instances away from ending his life. Lightning struck down from the heavens once more, and a bright light enveloped them all. The last thing Berthold could see was those emeralds of ever-flowing hate. And from her spot, Frida sighed in resignation. End of chapter. That's right folks, it's a skull crawler. If you're wondering how it can talk, that's actually canon. Skull crawlers can imitate human voices, usually to lure humans towards them. Creepy, I know. But other than that, big fight happens. Kenny showed up, but things are definitely not canon, and Frida is being Frida. And as literally everyone knew, Bertholdt's explosion was the big curveball in this fight. And to everyone saying that Ghidorah is weak, he's basically a toddler version of Ghidorah. That's why he doesn't have wings or gravity beams yet. Krista coughed as she pulled herself off the ground. The entire ground felt like it had jumped out from under her before a great rush of dust and wind swept through the city. What ga was that? Damn, sounds like the big bastard showed up, Kenny remarked as he slapped the dust off his hat before putting it back on his head. Who? Krista asked, standing up and looking at her apparent guardian. She caught his grim expression as he stared upwards. She followed his gaze and felt something sink into her gut. The colossal titan. She could only see the silhouette through the cloud, but it could be no other foe. She knew no other titan that tall. All at once, she started running back to the square, until Kenny snatched her hand. Hold up. You're just going to get yourself killed, running off like that. Kenny reprimanded as he held her firmly. Let me go. I have to know what's going on. Krista yelled as she tried to pull herself free. Kenny groaned and shook his head. Don't be stupid. Quit struggling so much or I'll dash. You'll what? Slit my throat like you did my mother's? Krista asked pointedly. Silence overcame them for an instant. Kenny frowned at her. You know, most say that to me a bit more spitefully. Yes, well, most don't have a mother that was trying to kill them at the time, Krista retorted hotly. Yeah, keeping you alive seems to be a repeat job of mine, Kenny remarked with an eye roll. And I can't let you just OW. Kenny let Krista go from a sudden pain, allowing Krista to pull free and run off. Damn little bitch bit me. Kenny cursed, smirking as he shook his injured hand and ran after her. Fiery little sister you got, Frida? Krista kept running, ignoring the burning in her lungs and the apprehension filling her stomach as she drew closer and closer to the square again, the colossal looming ever taller from her point of view. Meanwhile, the world was mute to Mikasa, numb almost as she pulled herself off the roof where she had landed. She reached up to touch her forehead and found a bit of blood staining her hand. Not much. It was just a scratch, nothing serious. Assuming she didn't have a concussion. What had happened? Something new showed up, attacking the shifters. Armin got free from Berthold. She had flown near to him in case he was injured and crashed. But then there was the sound of something buzzing in the air, a bright light, and then she was hurled across the roofs. Armin, where was he? She blinked, realizing he was right next to her. There was a wound on his neck, but it wasn't bleeding now. And he was speaking to her? Mikasa? Mikasa, can you hear me? Armin's voice suddenly flooded her ears. I'm all right. I think, Mikasa answered, calm but confused as she looked around, stopping as she became aware of the giant figure looming over the city. Everything came together now. Berthold. He transformed. Armin gave a pained nod to her numb recollection. Yeah. Thought we were all going to be swallowed by the blast, but the explosion from his transformation seemed to implode for some reason. Mikasa barely registered what he said as she looked over Trost, but could see nothing through the thick fog. It was quiet though, too quiet. Until it wasn't. Cannons along the walls began to fire at the colossal titan, aiming for the nape. The foe slowly but surely turned to face the attackers, ready to destroy the defenses once more. Armin gritted his teeth, knowing that Berthold might just open the breach again. And they might not have a way to stop him, not without. Where's Eren? The words left Mikasa's mouth before she even registered them. Her feet began running soon after. Mikasa, wait. Armin called after, following her as they traveled closer to the colossal, where it had appeared. Mikasa felt the pounding in her head again, a strange numbness over her body, everything playing over and over again in her mind, from when she had first laid eyes on Eren's new golden form, to the last instant she saw him glaring down at Berthold mere moments ago. This couldn't be happening again, not so soon, not after she got him back. Before she even realized it, she was standing on the broken end of a roof, the building half destroyed and annihilated by the colossal's transformation. She stared down, through the ash and dust as she saw a horrifically familiar shape of a body with no arms and 3 necks. Eren's form was collapsed in the crater, motionless. Steam and heat radiated off the golden scales, and at the end of each neck was a stump. Each head was eviscerated, with nothing to remain, and even the wounds had been cauterized. There was no movement, no sign of regeneration. Just stillness. Lifeless. Dead. Gone. No. No, no, not again, Mikasa whispered, her eyes intense. Eren? A loud thunderclap rang out behind her. The sound of a Titan transformation she now knew. She ignored it, just as she ignored Armin calling out for her to move, to snap out of it. She ignored everything as she tried to comprehend the reality in front of her. The shifters had killed Eren. They took him away from her. She gripped the handles so hard, anyone else's hands would be bleeding. She turned, seeing Reiner's outstretched hand inching closer, to crush her before she overcame her shock. But it was far too late for that. Reiner inhaled sharply as Mikasa vanished, sparks forming up his arms as she reappeared in his face, stabbing her sword into his eye. It broke on impact, shattering against the protective lens. But the sight of Mikasa ferociously stabbing her broken blade against his eye was truly something out of a nightmare for Reiner. Regaining his nerve, he reached up to swat her away, Mikasa dodging at the last second. Where is she? Where's she go? Reiner asked, looking around in all directions. A spray of blood erupted from over his shoulder. He scowled. Mikasa was attacking the gaps between his armor, but she couldn't do any true damage. Nothing important was where she could strike, and he would regenerate before the damage became a problem. That didn't make it any less annoying. Distracted by the Ackerman, he had no chance of noticing as Hang stood before the headless corpse with an unreadable expression. Is that really it for you? Hang whispered, reaching out to place a hand on the golden scales. She couldn't feel any heat coming off them, so it should be safe to. The earth screamed with endless, starving voices. The skies filled with screeching wings of lightning. Mountains rose to do battle, from the heavens to the depths. The seas roared to challenge the heavens, and the heavens answered. And all was torn asunder by their clash. Hang recoiled, her hand jerking away. What was that? She whispered in shock, sweat forming on her brow as she tried desperately to latch onto the images that passed through her head. They were scattered, almost incomprehensible. Be careful, Hang Zoe. She instantly had a sword pointed at the voice, seeing the figure of Frida Rice, walking out of the dust cloud with her walking stick. He might hurt you, Frida warned ominously. Hang didn't lower her weapon, narrowing her eyes. You know exactly what's going on, don't you? Frida didn't say anything, nor did she deny it. Eren's not dead, is he? Hang stated suspiciously. Frida glanced at the golden form for a moment before shaking her head. No, it's not nearly that easy to slay him. Hang breathed deeply for a moment. If that was true, this injury was still obviously too much for Eren to just shrug off and regrow his head. What do we need to do? Hang asked pointedly. Frida hummed, ignoring the sounds of battle around them. I can help him. Hang eyed her. The catch? She asked, knowing she would have done it already otherwise. No catch, Frida denied with a shake of the head. Just a problem. He'll wake up. Hang furrowed her brows. How is that a problem? Frida gained an empty look in her eyes, her expression hollowed with her gaze drifting high to the dark clouds gathering overhead. It is time, Frida said, turning to step closer to the gilded hide. Hey, what are you doing? Hang asked warily, sword still pointed at the noble. Frida turned to her with an expression that was almost apologetic? Unsure? Something sad was in that gaze, something that Hang couldn't read. You'll want to move away. It's about to be very dangerous here, Frida said, holding up her right, crippled arm and pulling back the sleeve. Hang narrowed her eyes as she saw the scars all up and down the arm. Not scars from a blade or blunt instrument. No, these scars formed fern-like patterns, curling and branching out so that barely an inch of the limb didn't have a mark upon it. One might mistake it for an intricate, stylized tattoo of a tree and its branches. But Hang had only seen scars like that from one thing. When someone survived being struck by lightning. Hang inhaled, feeling something filling the air as Frida's hand moved to touch those golden scales. Every instinct in Hang's body told her that, right here and now, she was far too close. With that, she used her ODM gear to put some distance between herself and this spot. Just as Frida made contact. Meanwhile burning. But he did not burn as all around him was scorched and ashen. What had happened? What had he been doing? He pulled himself up, his three heads shaking free of the dust. All around him was smoldered and melted, the air heavy with steam and dust. A battle. He had been in a great battle. And then the burning came. It hurt, a deep and harsh pain, but it was not enough to stop him. Nothing was enough to stop him. Only slow him, stall him, delay him. The winds turned, and the air cleared to reveal the world. Beneath the rumbling heavens and the harsh rain, the dead littered the battlefield. Corpses of all shapes and forms, mutilated and destroyed. The mighty and the weak, all had fallen. All had fallen to the Golden Demise or fled to escape. As all others that had dared to stand against him, the ground shook. Again and again the ground shook, the earth quaked with footsteps, the air filling with that accursed scent of salt and power that he was coming. He was not like the others. He was the rival, the defiant, the mightiest of this world. 3 mighty heads turned, looking into the thinning mist of ash, and saw the shadow of his foe. Lightning cackled in the skies, the winds tore the very land asunder, and power rippled in his chest as he reared his body back in a display of power. And through the mist of war he saw his hated foe, illuminate by a vile blue glow. Meanwhile, Bertholdt forced a stream of smoke to erupt from his body, stopping another attempted attack at his neck. He had managed to destroy most of the cannons, but that didn't stop the soldiers from trying to target his nape on their own. One in particular was Captain Levi of the Scouts. He made Bertholdt especially nervous, having been fast enough to get his blades in the flesh before being sent away with the steam. That would have incapacitated most enemies, the burns from the heat, but the captain just seemed to ignore any and all pain. What could he do though? The only option that seemed left was to reopen the breach so that he and the others could escape in the confusion. But there weren't many Titans immediately outside Trost, if any at all. Then again, that gave them a good chance to escape, assuming no one tried to pursue them too far outside the wall. That he had to hold out a bit longer though. Let Reiner make sure that Eren was truly dead. Maybe capture Ymir, but he doubted it. All he knew was that the moment he kicked in the breach, his comrades would know that was the signal to escape. They just had to pray that no more monsters showed behind him. Lightning erupted into the sky. Not from the sky, into it. A pillar of thunderbolts erupted, striking up to the clouds above. Levi scowled as he landed on the wall, watching the light show. What now? He asked himself, eyeing the source of the phenomenon. Eren's presumed corpse. The tails snapped into a house. Eren? Mikasa whispered in disbelief, landing on a roof. You got to be kidding me, Reiner said through gritted teeth as he stared through the smoke. The headless body twitched and spasmed, awkwardly stumbling to its feet, tails and neck swishing all about mindlessly. The entire form convulsed in a violent fashion, orange goo oozing from the necks, electricity dancing across the scales before. Suddenly, with a strangled screech of a roar, 3 malformed and undersized heads forced their way out of the wounds. With every second, they grew larger and corrected their forms, already snarling for blood and battle. Oh no you don't. Reiner yelled as he raced to attack before Eren could finish healing, ready to barrel into him and rip the heads off with his own hands if he had to. Eren, look out. Armin called from the rooftop, other voices joining in. But he had no idea if Eren could even hear yet, let alone. With a mighty swing of both tails, Reiner was sent crashing into the half-destroyed building. Armin quickly vacated the perch as the armored Titan's form quickly destroyed what was left of it. He got him. Marco called out in relief. Yeah, he did, Jean said with a narrowed look, watching as the form of Eren's 3 new heads stood there, coiled and turning towards the armored Titan with a distinctly predatory stance about him. Why do I have a bad feeling then? Damn it, Reiner muttered as he pulled himself out of the wreckage, about to stand when he froze, seeing the heads looming over him, a shadow over all 3 visages. Had Eren gotten bigger somehow? He didn't have time to contemplate that as the ground rumbled. Eren looked up, just as a giant red hand came down upon him, fingers closing around him. It unnerved Reiner, seeing how little of a reaction that garnered from his golden foe, even as the first lifted him from the ground. That's enough, Eren, Bertholdt growled out, more pleading, more desperate than angry as he squeezed his Titan's fist. Just stop. There's no point in fighting any dash. Bertholdt stopped as he felt the form in his hand not only resisting his hand's crushing force but actually pushing back against it. Then, with a terrible screech, lighting erupted in all directions from the hand of the colossal Titan, the severed digits and blood raining down from the skies. With them fell the golden reptile, roaring as it fell to earth. And all the while, the colossal Titan screamed, actually screamed in pain as it clutched its ruined hand. What the hell? Reiner cursed, more alarmed by that than the lightning. Shifters didn't feel pain from injuries to their Titans, so what was going on? He didn't have time to wonder, as at that moment the 3-headed beast landed feet first with a loud and crackling rumble in the ground. With 3 sets of roars, Reiner found himself being charged once more by his foe. Having no other alternative, he decided to meet the attack head-on. Literally. The two giants sped towards one another, the impact causing a shockwave to wash over all the spectators. Reiner had raised both fists to strike at his foe, but he found his strikes countered. By of all things, the jaws of the side heads, both biting onto his fists and wrestling with them as if they were hands rather than mouths. The strength of the jaws was so strong, he could feel the armor in his hands starting to crack. "Damn it, Eren," Reiner murmured, raising his head to meet the gaze of the middle head. His eyes widened in astonishment and fright. Eren's eyes were no longer the same intense green. They were now a hellish, burning shade of red and orange, as if there was an inferno of madness within those orbs, madness and hatred. The middle mouth shot down onto his shoulder, latching on with fangs sinking into his armor. All three heads heaved up, pulling his entire form off the ground briefly and slamming him into the stone ground. He tried to kick and twist himself loose, but it did no good, the lizard pushing and dragging his form against the pavement before holding him against it tightly. Reiner grunted as he felt it. Actually truly felt it. Despite it happening to his titan, he felt as though it was his real shoulder being gnarled by the teeth. But that was impossible. Shifters didn't experience the pain of their titans. So why did it hurt so damn much? Why was something starting to burn within him, deep in his spine? "What's he doing?" Armin asked, seeing Eren's chest and neck glow. Almost looked like something was being absorbed from Reiner, with the way the lights pulsed down the throats, akin to swallowing. Armin started as a shadow passed over him. "Eren, watch out," Mikasa called out. "Look up, you idiot," Jean screamed. "The big bastard's coming for you," Connie bellowed. Eren didn't react to their cries at all, not even as the colossal loomed over him. Reiner watched as Bertholdt lifted one of his mighty feet, to bring it down on the three-headed beast. Only now did Eren acknowledge the larger enemy, releasing Reiner to hiss and glare up at the offending titan. Reiner gathered his strength and half-leaped, half-crawled away to avoid Bertholdt's strike. There was no way that Eren could just shrug off an impact like that, right? Reiner hoped not, but as he watched over his shoulder, the lack of reaction concerned him. He narrowed his eyes as he realized that, under the shadow of the colossal, Eren seemed to be glowing? A light was forming in his chest and neck. But why? He didn't have to wonder for long. Just as the colossal foot came crashing down, the three heads opened their mouths. From their jaws, a bright and golden death came forth in the form of lightning. It shot through the colossal's mighty form, the bolt piercing through the foot and exiting out near the knee. With only one leg working and a great bellow of pain, the mighty colossal titan fell backward, slumping against the walls. "Did Eren just?" Connie whispered, staring on in awe. "He beat the colossal," Sasha cried out as cheers began to be heard around the town. "Don't get cocky. We still need to get down there and capture him," Levi ordered, eyeing the battlefield briefly. "Where is our titan, though?" Meanwhile, Ymir groaned as she awoke, feeling like she had just been rolled over by a starving Sasha running to the mess hall. What had happened? The trial, chained up with Krista in non-fun ways, the scaly bastard is Eren because of course he is old guy shot their cuffs off, and, right, she had been flung away by the explosion of the colossal. She was still alive though and still in her titan. That was not a bad sign at least. She took a breath, refocusing on her connection to her titan, seeing through its gaze once more. Her titan had landed in a narrow street, practically an alley far from the battle. Not too surprising. Her titan was small and titans were light to begin with. She just hoped no one up top blasted her the moment she started moving. She came to a stop as the sound of wood snapping came to her ears, followed by something more organic to say the least, the sound of something munching on something else. In her experience that wasn't good, that meant titans, pure titans. Had the wall been breached again? Still, if it wasn't aware of her, she could get the drop on it without any fuss. With that in mind, she climbed up the side of the building to get sight of her foe. Only it wasn't a foe, or she hoped not at least. It was the strange creature that had climbed over the walls, seemingly from nowhere, just to aid her and Eren against the Marleyans. She was pretty sure she even heard Marley, but that might be the concussion talking. They had fallen nearby one another, apparently. More importantly, it was eating something. That something wasn't human, but by the golden shine she saw as it gobbled the pieces up, she was pretty sure it was eating chunks of flesh ripped off from Eren at some point. Finally awake? She started at the voice, the tone tired and wary as the elongated head turned in her direction. "Ally?" she gargled out. "I saw you with Jaeger, so I assume you're not with the dogs," he answered gruffly, a long tongue snapping out to pull in more chunks. "Otherwise, I would be eating you instead of these." Ymir appreciated that. She really did. Why eat? I'm resisting the urge to eat everyone and everything right now, he explained with a groan. This'll do for now. Ymir frowned though. Eat a titan? How could that be filling? They just dissolved, right? The creature cocked its head as Ymir pulled herself free from her nape. Would this help any? Ymir called, pointing to her own titan body. You serious? He asked incredulously. Yeah, I got another left in me. And I think you're worth more in a fight than a spare transformation, Ymir explained with a smirk. He stared at her for a moment before doing the most human thing possible. He chuckled. I appreciate the offer, but save that for saving your skin if you need it. Ymir nodded, glancing over her shoulder. She could see the colossal titan propped against a wall, and she could hear familiar roars in the distance. Looks like that blast didn't slow that scaly bastard of ours down, she mused in relief. Fighting the other shifters without Eren would be hard enough, let alone the big guy himself. So, what do I call whatever your freaky ass is? He snorted at her question. There isn't a word for what I am, I think. Just call me a crawler, he answered with his version of a shrug, his entire body and tail jerking with the motion. As for a name you first, what's yours? Ymir, she answered, eyeing the creature as it crawled up on the roof as well. The crawler stopped and looked right at her. Seriously? Didn't pick the name, just decided to live with it, she answered bluntly. Though, you knowing that raises a lot of questions though. What, did Jaeger not tell you people anything? He asked in annoyance. Ymir raised an eyebrow. Did Eren know something she didn't? That'd raise a lot more questions if so. No, but let's start with your name. Name's Grice, he answered, flexing his muscles as he readied to race back to the battle. Now come on, let's make sure Jaeger hasn't bitten off more than he can chew. Meanwhile, when Kenny caught up to Krista, he found her propped against a building, half sunk to the ground. What, tired already? Kenny asked with a dry smirk. Her lack of answer concerned him. The blonde was leaning over, hands on either side of her head, taking deep and labored breaths. Kid, what's wrong? Kenny asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. Her head snapped up, looking at him with wide, unblinking eyes. You can't hear that? Krista asked, her voice shuddering. Kenny cocked an eyebrow. I can hear him fighting, same as you. Krista shook her head forcefully. Not that him. Eren. You can't hear him? Kenny frowned. No, that's not something I can do. What's he saying? Krista shivered, unable to answer as she covered her ears in a futile effort to block it out. To block him out. Because he wasn't saying anything. He was roaring. And in that roar, Krista could hear so many terrible, unnameable desires. Krista inhaled, slowly looking back up at Kenny. What is he? Kenny frowned. Your sister would be the one to ask about that. What sister? Krista asked, blinking. Wait, do you mean the girl from my dreams? Probably knowing her, Kenny answered with a shrug. Now come on. It's not safe here. End of chapter. Well, I think you all know what, or rather, who just happened. Won't say much more than that. Also, yes, the crawler's name is Grice, and yes, Krista's past is the same up until a certain point. You're probably all beginning to see some pieces line up by this point. Also, I feel the need to thank you all. This FIC has 700 reviews now, and over 1.5k in followers and faves. I honestly never thought my Ghidorah Eren FIC would be this popular, but thank you all the same. The air was filled with cheers and celebration. However premature, it was to be expected. They had just witnessed the defeat of the colossal titan by Trips, or rather Eren. There wasn't much of a point in that code name anymore, Erwin decided as he watched over the battle. There were few orders to give, little to do. Soldiers on the wall were already moving to try and secure the colossal shifter. The female was still missing after the explosion. He already had scouts looking for her. And the armor currently had chunks of set armor spraying across the area, courtesy of a strike from Eren's tails. Still, despite it all, Erwin didn't feel like celebrating. No, more than that, he didn't feel confident in how things had gone. Some instinct in the back of his head screamed that something was wrong with this. Eren's fighting style had changed utterly. Whereas before, it was mostly brute force, now there was something else. Like he knew what he was doing, knew how to fight with that form. Commander, a familiar voice called out as someone landed on the same roof as him. Petra, he acknowledged. Has Levi captured the colossal? She shook her head in disappointment. He wasn't in the nape. The captain thinks he's hiding inside the body as it disappears, waiting for a good chance to flee. The area is surrounded, Erwin deduced, not asked. If the colossal was capable of that devastation twice in a day, he would have done so already. Captain Levi came to the same conclusion, Petra answered. Orders, sir? Were there any sighting of the female Titan from the wall? Erwin inquired. Petra shook her head. None I could see. But the Ijah Titan? Our shifter is heading back to the battle with the new creature. Yes, that was another matter to address. Thankfully, this creature could speak, so hopeful they could obtain some answers from it if they all survived this. We need to locate the female Titan. Petra scowled at that. Does anyone even know what she looks like? Annie Leonhardt. Blonde hair, ponytail, blue eyes, about as intimidating as Mikasa. The two turned to see two members of the 104th approaching them, Jean and Marco, who both saluted. I admire your will to help, but you do realize that your comrade is now a traitor, correct? Erwin asked firmly, eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Sir, to be frank, I don't have a damn clue what's going on anymore, Jean remarked, glancing out as Eren bit at the shoulder and wrist of Reiner's arm, trying to either break or tear the limb off while the armor titan kept trying to punch his way free. But yeah, I get they're traitors. And unless we've been kept completely in the dark, everyone else has a lot of questions too. I don't know if Ymir has the answers or not, but if we need even one of these three alive, well... Reiner's roar of pain made Jean wince. It might be best if we tried to catch Annie before Eren, Marco finished diplomatically. Erwin couldn't argue with that logic. Nor did he have reason to believe that there were more shifters among the troops. If there had been, they would have struck by now and aided the other three before Eren regained the upper hand. Very well. Petra, take these two and gather some scouts to locate Annie Leonhardt. Capture her if possible, if not, kill her, Erwin ordered swiftly. Jean did his best to keep the discomfort off his face. Traitor or not, this situation was hard to process and stomach all at once. Though where Annie could be he had no idea. Meanwhile, Armin replayed what happened over and over again. He had dived to get away from the battle, his previous spot crumbling away from the damage Eren and Reiner did to the building. He landed on another roof nearby. He thought it was sturdy. He thought it was safe to land there. He had been wrong. The shingles gave out the moment he landed, sending him to fall off the roof and into an alley. His lines shot off, catching the side of the building. But he hadn't had time to correct his landing. Instead of his feet landing firmly on the wall, he ended up flung through a window. When he opened his eyes, he realized a knife was to his throat. Armin. He recognized that voice anywhere. Annie? He said, a tremble to his voice as they stared at one another. And that was where they were now, in a dark house, her ready to end his life as they heard and felt the fight going on outside. Make a noise or try anything and I'll just transform again, she warned in her usual voice of apathy. But it didn't quite reach her eyes. Armin nodded slowly. All three of you have threatened to kill me today, Armin noted idly. Then don't press your luck, Annie warned as she stood back slowly. Can you at least tell me why? What this is all about? Armin asked with a frown. We're here to destroy humanity, obviously, Annie said dryly. You could have done that in an afternoon at any time, Armin remarked pointedly. Annie, just tell me, what do you all want? What is the point of all this? Annie glanced between Armin and the wall, both of them feeling a particular hard shake in the ground. Eren and Reiner could be fighting mere yards from them on the other side of the wooden walls. Do you think we were ever really friends, Armin? Annie asked softly. Eren clearly gets it. He always got it. He's going to kill all three of you if given the chance. Were you there at Shiganshina? Armin asked with a frown. When our dash. I lured the Titans to the wall, Annie answered flatly. Instead of a stream, I brought a flood of them. Happy? Armin flinched, his face morphing into frustration. I don't understand, why did this all have to happen? Annie kept her guarded gaze on him. We don't have much choice, Armin. Bullshit, Armin remarked, smiling hollowly as Annie raised an eyebrow. Pretty sure that'd be what Eren would say. Annie paused before continuing. True. I'm sure Bertholdt or Reiner would bullshit you or give you some sob story. The truth is that we want to go home, Armin. And to do that you have to kill us? Armin asked incredulously. The sick irony isn't lost on me, Annie said with a frown. Just answer me this much, Armin said with a sigh. About Eren dash. Haven't the slightest idea, Annie preempted. Armin was almost surprised by the bluntness but took the answer for what it was. I don't suppose there is a chance I could convince you to join our side? Are you being serious or just stalling me? Annie asked idly. Both, Armin admitted with a shrug. But you already knew that. Annie didn't react, knowing they both understood what was going on. About as much chance of you joining us, Annie remarked. Didn't think so, Armin said with a small, fake smile. With nothing left worth saying, the room became silent. Too silent. They both realized it at once. There were no more vibrations on the ground, no more roars or crashes from outside. Tension filled the air, their stalemate becoming more and more uncertain. If the battle had ended, it was likely in Eren's victory. But where was the commotion? The cheers? The sounds of soldiers scrambling to capture Reiner and search for Annie? Even Eren's lightest step should cause some. The floor shook for an instant, serving as their only warning before the roof came crashing down, a mass of gold smashing through. Armin was saved, but only barely as he jumped to the side, rolling so that his side impacted with the wall. Eren's head and teeth were right next to him, not even half a meter from him. "What the hell?" a loud voice called from up top. Looking skyward as Eren ripped his head out, Armin could see that on top of the building was Ymir's Titan. "Jaeger, snap out of it, she's with us, right?" Another mountainous voice roared, the same one from the creature that came over the wall. Looking across the room, Armin saw that Annie had made her escape from the commotion. With a frown, he used his gear to come out and land on the roof. "Eren, what's wrong?" And blinked as he realized he was right behind his still human childhood friend. "Mikasa." "Armin." Mikasa returned in surprise as she looked back at him. "What are you dash?" "Annie was here a moment ago," he informed, making Mikasa tense. That matter, however, was put on hold as they heard the rushing of enormous feet. They looked just in time to see the golden beast rushing forward and leaping up on the building. It made the jump, but Eren's immense weight tore through the wooden construct, all the while trying to get at Ymir, who kept leaping out of his reach. The two-legged newcomer, thankfully, was keeping the very injured Reiner occupied. The protective layer of the armor titan was in ruins, fractures all over as pieces fell away the more he struggled against the monster whose tail held him by the neck and continued to keep him wrestled to the ground. "What's going on? Did Ymir attack Eren?" Armin asked in alarm, looking at the scene uncertainly. "No. I don't know. She showed back up and Eren just attacked her," Mikasa answered. Armin narrowed his eyes as he took Eren in. His friend was acting with a single-minded, almost blind rage. None of the other soldiers were sure what to do anymore, watching the battle in confusion. No one was sure if Ymir and the mysterious creature were allies now or foes. "Everyone, stay away from the golden bastard." Both looked up to see a familiar scout landing nearby. "Section Commander?" Armin greeted in surprise. "Armin, Mikasa," she greeted in relief, eyeing Eren's form cautiously. "Listen to me, there isn't much time. That's not Eren right now." Both of them inhaled sharply at that. "What do you mean?" Armin asked in worry. "Think about it," Hang said. "He lost all of his heads, all 3 brains. He might have regrown them, but who knows how much he's gotten back." "Are you saying that on top of everything, Eren has amnesia?" Mikasa asked in disbelief. "No, I'm saying he's working purely on instincts for the moment," Hang reiterated. "He's basically fighting in his sleep." The idea of Eren fighting in his sleep seemed far too believable to Armin. "Section Commander, how can you be sure dash?" "Just trust me, I am sure," Hang said swiftly, a deadly serious look in her eyes. "I don't have time to explain. Just that we need to wake Eren up before he hurts someone." Mikasa set herself into a determined look. "What do we need dash?" "Wait," Armin said suddenly. "Annie was just here." "What?" Hang asked in alarm. "She was hiding in this building," Armin explained, looking at Mikasa. "Mikasa, I'll try and get through to Eren. You need to help the others deal with Annie." "But dash." Mikasa started before Hang put a hand on her shoulder. "He's right. The female titan might strike the moment Eren has an opening," she instructed. "Armin, are you sure you can get through to Eren?" "We don't have much choice but to try," Armin said with a frown. "At best case like this, Eren will only kill someone by accident. But if this state sees humans as enemies..." That grim notion sat over their heads. "Mikasa, go." "I'll help Armin," Hang prompted, the Ackerman reluctantly nodding, taking off on her odium gear. "So, any ideas?" "Just one," Armin remarked uneasily. "You're sure Eren's still in there?" Normally, Armin would have no issue believing that, but Hang pointing out that Eren had to somehow regenerate his very own memories had made him a bit worried. He didn't know that much about biology, let alone the brain, but it still sounded strange to put it lightly. Yeah, I'm sure," Hang said with a distracted look before refocusing her attention. "Then yeah, I have one idea," Armin admitted reluctantly. "Break. He was flying. How was he flying? Since when? No, wait. He could always fly. Fly further, farther than any could imagine, beyond darkness and light. Yes, he had always been able to fly. He had always been free. He flew over vast waters of violet, under a scarlet sky with 2 orange suns. He flew over endless blue sands that gave way to mountains as clear as glass. He flew over it all, but to where was he flying? Was there even a where, or just endless horizons? He was fine with either, but still he wondered, where was he going? And where did he come from? He landed, the barren earth trembling before his mighty form, his threefold gaze surveying it all. The ground rumbled more, and it was not him this time. A challenger had come, an enemy to slay. From beneath his feet came a worm, a pathetic, insolent worm that was less than his tails. With feeble fangs and brittle spikes, it dared to attack him. He growled, more annoyed than angry, for there was no pain, no injury, only the irritating poking against his glistening scales. He looked about himself, 3 heads considering how to dispose of this meager foe. Impulsive as ever, left lounged down and bit into the wretch. He ripped it from its dwelling and right joined by biting into the middle, rippling the creature asunder, its thin and verdant blood coating their fangs and scales. Middle paid little heed to the acts of his fellow heads, turning his gaze skyward. Dark clouds were coming on the horizon and the winds growing. Good. Soon it would all be over. Wait. What will be over? Their time here, of course. What else? All they needed was to finish the storm. Finish the storm? Then we will destroy them all. All of our enemies will be gone. Yes, of course, that was right. How could he forget? His hated enemies. The giants. Furless, skinless, mindless. Maggots upon our power. Traitors, false friends. Bloated, overgorged maggots. Who else could be his enemies? How many others? Perhaps it was better to just kill them all. Maybe. Eren. A voice called out through the heavens and the distant rumbling thunder. Insolent pest. There was something on his nose. A creature. It was like the enemies but much smaller. But some of the enemies could become smaller. Yellow at the head, blue in the eyes, furless skin, all else that wasn't covered. What? Who is that? Another maggot to crush. But where had it come from? It had no wings to fly? No wings to fly? When did he get his own wings? Eren. Listen. You have to snap out of it, the creature yelled out. Eren? Is that what we're called? Yes, it is what they call us. A useless title that they might give to their golden demise. But why was this thing looking into his eye like that? Why was it so familiar? Remember who you are. Why you fight so damn hard. You're not just some wild animal, I know you're not. It called out to him desperately. He could crush it, bite it, tear it to shred. He should. He would. No, wait, I can't do that. Why not? Because he's Dash. Eren. If you keep going like this, they're going to escape. He's what? What is going on? Why are we hesitating? Are you really going to let them get away with what they did? To our home? To your mother? Get out of my head. The storm grew heavy overhead with rage. Break. Armin was crouched on the nose of the middle head. He had one of his swords jammed between the scales. Not enough to pierce the surface that was beyond him, but it did keep him steady. You're Eren Yeager, damn it. And I know that whatever is going on, it is nothing you can't beat, Armin said, his face caught in some mess between a scowl of frustration and worry and a knowing smile. There was a brief, heavy silence as those red eyes stared into him. All the eyes, as all 3 heads were fixated on him. The middle looked unmoved, angry still. He looked to his left and saw that Eren's right head had a strained, confused look on its face, the slit pupils widening and narrowing. He looked to his right and saw that the left head. Armin gasped in shock and relief as he watched the hellish colors bleed from those eyes, revealing familiar and vibrant greens. The middle head growled, and that was the only warning Armin had before he was flung into the air. To Armin's horror, the middle head tried to snap forth and eat him. But to his confused relief, the right head's eyes suddenly snapped to green, roaring as it bit into the middle head's neck, pulling it away with a pained and outraged roar. The left head stretched out, using its tongue to grab Armin out of the sky before leaning as far away from the quarreling heads as he could. Eren? Armin called in shock, getting a grunt of confirmation before the head placed him down on a building and the tongue released its grip. With Armin safe, Dre's demeanor turns to wrath as it turned back to the fight between Ainz and Middle. Ainz continued to hold him steady, even as Middle roared before biting into Ainz's neck and trying to dislodge him. Dre snarled, reaching forth to bite just below the head. Middle growled and roared in indignation. Hate bellowed with Eren's chest, a glow starting to rise within it, and Dre could taste the golden death building in his throat. Middle glared with indignation before it suddenly ceased to struggle, its eyes fading to green as well. Break. He glared up at the great storm overhead and knew it was returning the gaze just as hatefully. Without eyes or body, it was staring at him with enough wrath to shake the heavens. And Eren did not care. With a mighty, hateful roar, he bellowed into the storm, and the storm roared back with thunder that would smite gods and winds that would tear down mountains. Louder and louder did their roars echo, the world trembling before the dragon and the storm, as if they might break under the weight of their hate and anger. And in fact the world did break. The strange world around Eren shattered, falling away like shards of glass, the fragments grinding into dust of lights as even the storm vanished. In place of that world was something else. A vast realm of sands under an endless sky of stars. I know this place. The strange nostalgia, the feeling of memories just beyond his reach, was brought to a halt as he felt the light upon his scales. Eren turned to face it and saw the source. A tree that glowed as an entity of pure blue light. With no wind, its branches swayed strangely about itself as if alive. It was massive, yet it was puny. Was Eren looking up at the tree, or looking down on it? He couldn't tell. It felt like it loomed over him, and at the same time he dwarfed it. Why was it both? How was it both? The wind rushed against his mighty form, bringing his gaze skyward. Above the tree the storm formed once more, even in this place. No, not just loomed but circled it. As if to strike the tree down, to claim the tree. But even with the blackest of clouds, their darkness did not obstruct the stars above. Eren had no idea what he was doing anymore. There was no thought, no plan here, only instinct and the knowledge that this storm had almost brought him to harm Armin of all people. Only instinct and only hate. Thus, with a single wave of wings he did not have, Eren scattered the storm, the clouds flung from far from the tree. This time. Why Eren had that impression he did not know, but he did. And as the storm scattered, a single word of ire reached Eren's mind. The whelp. End of chapter. Yeah, you all can guess who that is. Next chapter will wrap up the fight, if it can be called that still, and we can move on to everyone finally getting some answers. Not much else to say. Hope you all enjoyed this bit. Until next time. Annie knew a golden chance when she saw one. She didn't know what caused Eren to start attacking Ymir, and she frankly didn't care. With all the chaos going on, she made a rush for Reiner and the weird creature ensnaring him. She delivered a slice to the tail and was surprised by how well it cut into the beast. What did that? Grice roared as his tail unfurled instinctively, snapping his jaw around as he searched for the new foe. Reiner now. Annie yelled, looking right into his titan's eye as she flew by. The bitch, Grice growled, trying to swipe her out of the air, but Annie escaped by centimeters. Reiner took the opening, punching the crawler in the head. It did little damage against the hard skull, but it did knock his foe off him for a moment. Grice snarled as he saw the armored titan rise once more, looking ready to fight again despite everything. With a bestial screech, Grice leaped forward and tackled the titan to the ground. But the moment they made impact with the ground, he recognized that the body was limp in his grip and hissing steam was starting to rise from it. Cowards, he cursed, raising his head to bellow out over the city. The dogs are trying to escape. They're heading for the wall. You heard him. Rico called out to the soldiers on the wall. Everyone with a blade, watch for anyone attempting to approach. Do not let them escape. Anticipation rumbled in Grice's throat and chest as he leaped atop the nearest building, crushing a piece of ceiling in his grasp as his eyes scoured the walls for any sign of them. Normally, he'd expect them to go somewhere less defended. But the shifters couldn't just abandon the colossal titan like that. But they weren't stupid, spent and desperate, but not stupid. If they could, they'd make an opening or wait for one to. Lightning rained down from the heavens. Grice turned around to see Jaeger being struck by it. But of course, it did no damage, coursing over and through him as Jaeger let loose a mighty roar. It was not a scream or a call, there were no words. It was a primal roar of fury and defiance. As the lightning subsided, so did his roar and so did the storm. Grice felt like smirking as he saw the green eyes of Jaeger. Looks like he got his heads in order. His good mood evaporated as another lightning strike came down, causing him to look up at the wall. Just as he expected, Jaeger's light show had distracted everyone just long enough for the Marleyan dogs to make their move. The female titan was on top of the wall. Her transformation killed or scattered those that could stop her. She was about to jump onto the other side and make a run for it, her allies no doubt on her titan's body. They might just get away today. He saw her body tense, prepared to jump down. And once more lightning danced across the sky. But this lightning didn't fall, nor did it rise. 3 beaming bolts became as one and shot straight through the female titan's right shoulder, severing her arm from her body, and forcing her to let out a horrendous screech. The limb fell with a clenched fist, Annie futilely trying to grab it before it fell. Her blue eyes shot up, looking past all else and straight to Jaeger. His chest and neck began to glow once more with ominous energy. Annie flung herself over the opposite side of the wall as fast as she could. Bertholdt knew several bones had cracked or even broke by the end of that fall. By some mercy, he hadn't landed head first while still held in the fist. "Damn it," he cursed, feeling the heat of the steam against his skin while he pushed the large finger off, crawling his way out. "Damn it," he cursed again, his entire body in pain while slowly healing. He stood and checked his gear but realized Annie's grip and the fall had damaged them beyond use. His hooks bent and at least one of his gas tanks was cracked open. "Damn it all, it wasn't supposed to go like this," he muttered desperately, feeling the rumbling in the ground and hearing the zip line in the air. The crash gave him some cover, the steam and dust covering the area. But what options did he have now? The wall behind him blocked him, towering over him all the more now that he couldn't use his ODM gear. The houses nearby? That'd save him for a few minutes at best, they'd search them for sure. Not to mention hiding wasn't easy with his size. He could transform again. He clutched his hand as he remembered the feeling of his hand exploding, and one knee grew weak at the memory of those lightning beams tearing through his leg. He couldn't explode again, that was off the table. And it didn't help at all the first time. But he could try and fight. Kick the boulder through the wall and escape in the confusion. But that pain, that terrible pain. He had never felt pain like that before. He never felt any pain from his Titan before. There was the pain from the wound to trigger the transformation and the pain from overusing his powers, but his Titan's own injuries? Those never hurt. So what was? A low roar and a harsh snap of jaws drew his attention. To his left, he could see the strange shape of the crawler climbing along the roofs. The sound of rocks falling made him snap around in alarm to the opposite direction, seeing the jaw Titan lurking up at the wall, watching him cautiously. Heavy footsteps brought his numb gaze down the road before him, heavy with smoke. Closer and louder they got, but still he could not see his final and truest foe. Then it stopped and all fell into silence. No one moved and Bertholdt couldn't even breathe. With 3 great breaths, the dust of debris was blown away, and Bertholdt was staring down the 6 eyes of Eren, each head low to the ground, their fangs bared and their eyes filled with hate. Cold sweat crept up his spine, and he felt his hand and leg throb with steady, repeating pulses of pain. He'd have to fight. He was injured enough to trigger his transformation. There was no other way, he'd have to try. But something stopped him. Because he realized too late that Eren wasn't looking at him anymore. All he felt was a hand touch his spine before something sparked in his very soul, pain overwhelming him. Before he could even scream, he collapsed into unconsciousness, falling hard to the ground. "Not today, Bertholdt Hoover," Frida said while staring down at the shifter, her scarred hand still outstretched. She shifted her sights onto the hulking form of Eren, whose 3 heads eyed her suspiciously. "You have a lot to explain?" Frida just chuckled under his scrutiny, however tired she might look and feel. "I think that's true for all of us, Jaeger," Grice said, cocking his head from his perch on the building next to the dragon. Eren rose himself up, each head looking at the creature with different flavors of confusion. "I don't know what the Golden Brat said," Levi said as he landed in front of Frida, eyes narrowed. "But I'm going to assume he's wondering the same thing I am." "Unfortunately, I can't explain just yet," Frida said apologetically. "And just why is that?" Levi asked, rather tired of this routine. Frida idly grabbed her crippled arm. "Because it seems I pushed this old injury a bit too much." Levi grimaced as Frida collapsed to her knees. He grabbed her before she hit the ground completely, awkwardly holding her up. Checking her vitals, he didn't find any signs that she was faking it or about to die. He looked to the side as he saw Ymir's Titan climb down, the freckled girl pulling herself out of the spine. "Is it finally over?" she asked, exasperated but hopeful. "For now, yeah," Levi answered, wondering just what Ymir would do now. "Good," she said, pulling herself out of the Titan fully, bracing herself as it collapsed and began to dissolve. "Seeing as my trial was interrupted, I'll just play it safe and turn myself in." Levi grunted but didn't deny that point. "Where is everyone anyway?" Ymir asked idly, glancing around at the distinct lack of soldiers in the area. "Holding back in case he transformed again," Levi answered, nodding to Bertholdt. "Any idea what she did to him?" "I have a good hunch," Emer answered with a frown. I think you do too. Levi remained silent at that. What are they talking about? No idea. Someone better fill us in later. I still don't know how you put up with that, let alone with 3 heads, Grice commented with a head shake. Jaeger, you ever figure out what happens if we eat one of the 9? Heinz became rather dumbfounded at that while Zwei became very curious. Dre, however, do I know you? It's me? Grice? The crawler asked, gesturing to his head. I know my face has seen better days, Jaeger, but I still remember your gilded ass. Wait a minute, Levi said, looking up at Grice while pointing to Eren. You know the golden brat? However, Grice looked between Eren and Levi several times before settling on the golden figure. Jaeger, did this kid just call you a brat? Emer looked between the 3 awkwardly before summing up the situation as best as could. I think there's been a big fucking misunderstanding here. Later. Somehow the entire thing felt anticlimactic to Jean. Any idea what they'll do with him? He asked with crossed arms, frowning as he watched the grim and nervous soldiers taking the unconscious and restrained form of Bertholdt away. What can they do? Connie asked, scratching his head. I mean, what stops him from just transforming again to escape? If Emer is on our side, maybe she told them how? Marco suggested uncertainly. I'm more confused by that, Sasha said as she, unlike the rest of them, was staring in the opposite direction, more specifically at the rather giant creature. Commanders Erwin and Pixis, among others, had gathered near the breach to talk with the newcomer. Among them was even Emer. How many things like Eren are there? Jean asked with a scowl. There's no way that this thing showed up by chance. Yeah, and what was he calling Reiner and the others? Dogs of gnarly or something? Connie asked in bewilderment. And why does it talk? Sasha asked, sounding almost disturbed by that fact alone. Meanwhile, the discussion had taken on an interesting turn. My name is Eren. Eren? Okay, I get needing a new name, but why the owls? Grice asked in confusion. What does an owl have to do with it? Jaeger, start talking sense or I'm bashing all 3 of your heads. Grice warned in annoyance. And how did you even get a 3rd head? Eren blinked as all 3 heads glanced at each other. Turning their attention back to Grice, they silently rose to their full height, towering far over the bipedal. Yeah, rub it in, Grice grumbled under the obvious intimidation tactic. So this is going well, Hang remarked in thought. They all understood only Grice's side of the conversation, but they still felt like they were following it well enough. Hey eyebrows Baldy? Where's Krista? Shouldn't she be here to play translator? Emer reminded with a scowl. Sadly, Cadet Lenz hasn't been located, Pixis remarked with a hum. But weren't you last seen with her? Emer suddenly looked very concerned. I left her with someone, an old creep that works with that Frida lady. Erwin furrowed his brows as he looked at the shifter dubiously. You of all people left her with an unknown party? He had ODM gear and they knew each other somehow, Emer answered with a shrug. And, I had to in case Eren got his scaly ass handed to him. As the 2 giants had stopped their bickering to listen to the conversation, Heinz growled above her while Dre gave a noise that might have been thanks. If you blockhead if, Emer repeated with a weak glare. So once again Frida has all the answers, Levi remarked. I don't like this. Neither do I, but we best deal with the more immediate issue, Hang said as she stepped forward. Hey you, big guy with the handsome skull. Me? Grice asked in bewilderment. You get used to it. Mostly. Yeah, Eren? Just give me a few minutes with him, okay? Hang requested, getting a snort of acceptance. She then looked up at Grice with a wide grin. So, you know the beautiful bastard here? She asked, jabbing her thumb at Eren. Grice reared back in surprise as he stared at the strange woman. That. I'm sorry, but are you his new wife or something? Heinz, Zwei, and Dre made great efforts to not react or respond to that inquiry, taking deep breaths through the noses. Oh, how flattering, Hang said with a grin, pretending to swoon. Sadly no, I am still single. Grice looked to Eren again. I'm not sure if I'm feeling respect or disappointment, he said before looking to Hang. Yes, I know Jaeger. Not sure why he's acting like we never met. Does he have amnesia or something? Please tell me he doesn't. No, nothing like that, Hang answered. Now, when you say Jaeger, you know him as? Grisha Jaeger? Grice answered bluntly. My father? Grice recoiled back as every human covered their ears from Eren's startled roar. Father? What? Grice repeated in surprise, and a flash of anger roiled through his body as he stared at the 3-headed beast before letting it slip away. Wait, but, Eren? So you're not Zeke? Who the hell is Zeke? Eren didn't know how he was more confused right now than when he had been trying to figure out how he became a three-headed monster. But here he was, utterly stupefied by what this Grice was saying. Grice growled in annoyance as he suddenly understood, balancing on his tail to wipe a hand over his snout. I'm sorry, it's just that form. He was. Eren's body relaxed into a state of curious disbelief. You mean that Eren's father could turn into this creature too? Hang called up in interest. Yeah. He was the only one that could. Most turned out more like me, Grice said with an unsettling pause. There was a story there, but Hang decided that was something to dig into later. Eren, just for the record, you didn't KN dash. Hang continued, immediately getting very rapid headshakes. Yeah, I didn't think so. Wait, Grisha never told you anything? Anything at all, Grice said with a troubled tone, getting the same answer from Eren. What the hell, Grisha? Eren seconded, third and fourth that sentiment. It would appear that we have many things to clear up, Erwin stated, eyeing Grice pointedly. Grice, correct? Tell us, why are you here exactly? Your arrival seems to be too good to be a coincidence. I could hear his call, Grice said, motioning his head to Eren. Everyone noticed his hesitation in the word here, but didn't ask for an elaboration. I thought Grisha needed some help. Seemed like I was right when I heard the dogs of Marley picking a fight with him, Grice explained. I was wondering why he didn't answer back. I was sure he was on the other side of that rock. I was. Just thought you were an enemy? Grice shook his head at the absolute mess this was all turning out to be. You keep using that word, Levi stated with a frown. What the hell is Marley? Grice seemed to be stunned for a moment before shaking it off. Right. The owl did tell us something about this all those years ago, Grice said solemnly, turning his gaze to Ymir. Why haven't you told them anything? Let's just say I was in a bit of a bind over if I should help them or not. One that Frida cleared up, Ymir remarked. So someone did sneak in that night Hank's pets were attacked, Levi stated knowingly. Yes, same creep with Krista, Ymir answered with a shrug. Wait, Hank said, rounding on Ymir to glare dangerously at her. Are you telling me someone attacked Sean and Bean just to talk to you? Ymir leaned away uncomfortably, a bit intimidated by the crazy scientist. I believe we should address that later, Pixis said with a chuckle as he attempted to be diplomatic. Satisfy an old geezer's curious mind, Grice. Were you once a human like Eren here? Yes, I was. Grice answered, almost finding the question surprising. All the same, he noticed Eren leaning in with keen interest. Then perhaps you might be willing to tell us if there is a way to revert to human form? The commander asked with a wry smile. Turning back? It's possible. But Grisha was the only one who figured it out, Grice explained unhappily. Either he ran off without telling me or I wasn't in a good state to talk to. Good state? Hang echoed Eren's question, prompting Grice to grow uncomfortable. Unlike Grisha and Eren, I suppose, I have to eat. If I don't, well, I'll lose control. Thankfully, eating Titan somehow works. That is fascinating, Hang said, her body buzzing with excitement. And annoying, Grice said, suddenly groaning, his tail curling and shaking. Eren eyed Grice warily as he heard a growl, not from Grice's mouth, but from his stomach. Grice? Hang asked cautiously, backing away just a step. I'm fine, Grice assured as the hunger pang passed. But I have to leave soon and hunt some. That fight took a lot out of me. Are you going after Annie and Reiner? The shifters? Grice asked, noticing the wrath was still fresh in Eren's tone. No, not yet. I'll need to feed before I can catch up with them, and I'd rather not try fighting them as a mindless beast. Thank you for the aid all the same, Erwin stated. Should I trust you'll be back? Grice nodded. In the meantime, get the jaw here and that woman to explain what's really going on outside the walls. Trust us, we will, Levi said, giving Ymir a sideways glare. The jaw titan shifted awkwardly but made no denial. Grice looked to Eren, who obviously had 1,000,001 questions for him still. When I come back, we'll talk about your father. Is he dead? Grice paused, about to start scaling the wall before looking to Eren. He passed that power on to you. I can't imagine he did that and just left you to fend for yourself. Eren bowed his heads. Heinz gritted his teeth in grief, Zwei bore his sorrow silently, while Dre just tried to come to terms with that revelation as he gained an unfocused gaze. With nothing else to say, Grice leaped up to the wall, his claws digging as he began to scale up the large structure. The humans backed away, watching for any falling debris. Levi, go up and make sure no one attacks him. Right, Levi said as he ascended after Grice. Eren just watched the climbing crawler with a touch of envy in his eyes. As Grice reached the top, several humans backed away uneasily. "Easy, just passing through," he assured half-heartedly. He stopped as he reached the edge, looking out over the lands beyond this wall. He took it all in, the sun upon the green fields and small forests, the sights of abandoned buildings, the wind rushing over him, and so much more. "Gods, that's a great view," he said, taking a whiff of the clear air. But with it he caught another scent. Jaegers. It was faint, but it was up here or on something up here. Turning and alarming the soldiers, he spied two young soldiers, basically children. One was blonde, but the other was black-haired and had to have blood from Hiruzu. They both tensed as he faced them and sniffed again. Unless he was wrong, it was coming from the red scarf on the girl's neck. Friends of Eren's, he was sure. Still, did that mean that Grisha's son was this young too? "What were you thinking, Grisha?" he muttered before going over the side, sliding down with his claws against the wall. "What was that about?" Armin wondered as he watched Grice leap off the wall and head off to parts unknown. "And did he say?" "Grisha." Eren's father, Mikasa said with a frown, looking down at the other side of the wall, down at Eren and the others. "I think things just got even more complicated, Armin." Meanwhile, all heads turned to Ymir with expectant looks. Yeah, I'll spill. Just, where do you want to do this? We just going to stand here next to the boulder?" Ymir asked bluntly. Deeming that a fair point, Erwin nodded. "We'll take stock of the casualties and everyone's condition. Then once we have everyone present, you will tell us all you can. Just for the record, my information is probably really outdated." "I mean really outdated," Ymir cautioned. Pixis chuckled at that. "You make it sound as if you're 100 years old." "Closer to 80, Ymir answered bluntly. Hang turned to her in shock, the others giving Ymir strange looks. "Are you immortal or something? Is that a Titan perk?" "I wish," Ymir grumbled. "Trust me, it's nothing good. Just get your notebook ready, I have a lot to tell. I'm sure the bonehead and Frida can explain the rest." "Ymir," Erwin spoke up. "What does Frida have to do with you trusting us?" Ymir considered how to answer that for a moment before shrugging. "Your king is a lie. Frida's the real person in charge." Needless to say, that startled most of them, Erwin's eyes narrowing. "How do you know that that king is a fake?" "I think you already guessed on that," Ymir noted pointedly. "Especially after what she just did to the Colossal." Eren frowned, feeling very out of the loop on something extremely important. The king being a figurehead and Frida being the real queen? That didn't affect him really. But what did that have to do with what she did to Berthold? Glancing up and seeing Eren's confusion, Ymir looked to Hang in surprise. "Wait, did you not tell him everything I told you guys about the shifters?" Eren's gaze wasn't accusing, but he was clearly annoyed as he focused on Hang. "In my defense, we were still unsure if she was lying to us at the time," Hang explained apologetically to her favorite subject to study. "Seems we all have a lot of catching up to do," Pixis mused. "Shall I suggest that Trips remains close by when we all sit down and talk? It seems best to only have to tell this information once before we decide what to do with it." Eren nodded and, with care not to accidentally hit anyone, turned to walk off somewhere, his head and back slumping in obvious exhaustion. "Poor guy. He must be exhausted after all that," Hang remarked sympathetically. "Found out his friends are traitors and he had to regrow his own heads?" Ymir mused sourly. "That alone you need a drink for." "I'd share mine, but I doubt it'd help," Pixis joked. Eren ignored the talking behind him, their voices growing fainter with every step. He inevitably came to one side of Trost. There were soldiers everywhere, but this had little activity and no injured lying about. Without hesitation, he laid his massive body down with a rather loud thud. Not caring if he alarmed anyone, he allowed sleep to claim him. But even now it was still in the back of his mind. The glow of that tree in that vast sea of sand. The feeling of wind beneath wings he did not have. The voice of the storm taunting and goading him. The whelp. End of chapter. And fight's over. They got Berthold, Annie and Reiner are on the run, and the answers are finally coming out for everyone to hear. But yeah, Grice has been under the assumption that Eren was Grisha this whole time. Also, yes, this is canon, skullcrawlers are perpetually starving due to a hypermetabolism. Not much else to say. Hope you all enjoyed the fight, I trade not to drag it out. He wasn't in that land of sand this time. Nor was he looking out on some stranger world filled with beasts to fight. Instead he was in a storm. No, he was in the storm. A cyclone of clouds and rain spiraled around him, within the very eye of event. But he wasn't standing in it. It was like he was flying yet not. Without being able to see the ground below or the sky above, He had no idea if he was moving or just hovering in place. Despite it all, he found it hard to care, even as thunder rumbled all about. "What do you want?" His voices, three as one, echoed out into a spinning storm wall. Because he knew, somehow he knew just what and who was there with him in this storm. Lightning flashed brightly, illuminating a figure. Its shape was like Eren's own shadow, but one far more massive. And most importantly, with wings. "I am the storm." I know. Eren wasn't sure what he knew, just that he knew it. And what he knew was that this form, this power, it belonged to someone else. Something else. And the storm was that owner. "We must slaughter the maggots." Maggots. Titans. Yes, that was what they were to him, the both of them. Yet. Why? For what offense could maggots pay the storm? Eren flinched back as a million thunderbolts echoed all at once. Loud enough to shake the very earth to its core and rattle its interior. And above that was a more terrible noise. The roar of the storm. Too long have feasted so greedily. Eren couldn't agree more. We will kill them all. They wanted the same thing, him and the storm. And yet still. The winds calmed ever so slightly and Eren could feel this entity drawing closer. Shadows and clouds blew before him, taking on the misty likeness of a human standing before a large two-legged creature. "You mean that Eren's father could turn into this creature too?" Hanks echoed in the winds. "Yeah. He was the only one that could." Grice's answer came faintly. Eren glared at the storm. "What happened to my father?" There was a low rumble at his demanded question and Eren didn't know what it meant. Disappointment? Interest? He had no idea. Just that the storm knew exactly what he was talking about. The mist dispersed and reformed to take the very defined appearance of Frida Reese. The Maggot Queen? Meanwhile, Eren's eyes snapped open, a cold chill up the spines of his neck. He was on the ground, he could feel it beneath his scales. He wasn't fighting, nothing was attacking him, and there wasn't any pain. There was no wall of clouds, no strange voice, and no thunder. Everything was fine. For now at least. "Eren?" He turned to see Mikasa, who was waking from her own nap on Ainz's head. Said head wasn't exactly pleased, but he was not angry about that fact. That didn't mean he approved though. "Idiot. That's no place to sleep. That couldn't have been comfortable. Why that head?" Zwei gave Dre a pointed look while Ainz made every effort not to move with Mikasa sitting on him. "Sorry," Mikasa said, covering a small yawn as she looked up at the two heads. "They wanted me to show you where to go when you woke up. I wasn't sure how long you'd be." Eren was unanimously sure that Mikasa demanded that task. Still, his eyes drifted around, trying to spot any of the other cadets. "Everyone is fine," Mikasa promised as she leaped off the head, landing on the stone road and giving him a reassuring smile. "Thanks to you." Eren wasn't sure if he agreed with that as he looked around, eyes lingering on the large crater formed by Bertholdt's transformation, and the cracks in the wall where the colossal titan had collapsed. He could still taste it in his tongues. It looked like lightning and it felt like power, but the taste of it was not something Eren had a word for. He didn't think there was a word for it. "We have Bertholdt," Mikasa said with a frown. "I don't know where, but..." Eren nodded, fully understanding her. Hopefully the traitor was secured, locked up somewhere, and unable to transform. Without another word he rose to his feet once more. He could hear everyone reacting to that, mainly just calls of, "Look, he's awake," or something to that effect. Did he get bigger? He glanced down quizzically at Mikasa, who suddenly realized she said that out loud. "Follow me," Mikasa said, hoping he hadn't heard her, and took off on her ODM gear to land on a nearby roof. They walked in relative silence as Eren shrugged off the aches in his limbs. He wasn't sure if it was the fighting in general or regrowing his heads, but he had some terrible stiffness in his necks now. Regrowing his heads. How did he do that? Titans could do that sure, but judging by Ymir and the traitors, there wasn't actually anything like a brain in the heads. He knew he had brains in each skull, especially after Annie had stabbed one of his through the eyes. And the brain was both important and delicate. With a doctor for a father, that wasn't hard to pick up on. He was sure he should have some memory loss, but if he did, it wasn't obvious. He remembered everything of note since the Battle of Trost and everything before that. If anything was missing, he couldn't notice anything obvious. His mother, his father, Hannes, everybody from training. Everyone in his team that died, beside Armin and himself. "We're here." Her voice brought him out of his thoughts. Mikasa led him to what looked like a fairly normal house, minus the large hole in the roof, revealing an attic of sorts. The rubble had been cleared away for an impromptu meeting. "There's our beautiful bastard," Hang greeted, and Eren was almost thankful to hear her strange terms of endearment. Eren, Erwin greeted. Eren was almost surprised by them not using trips, but supposed an alias was largely worthless now. It's good of you to join us. Us was a very interesting group. There were the commanders, Erwin and Pixis of course. With them were Anka, Hang and Levi. The short captain was staring daggers at an older man Eren didn't know, wearing a hat and leaning against the wall with a blonde woman standing next to him. Nearest to where Eren loomed over was Krista, standing next to the hole with Ymir nearby. Ymir looked a bit uneasy but tried to keep a cool smirk on her face. Krista didn't look afraid per se, but she did seem a bit more concerned by his arrival than he would have liked. Mikasa stepped down to join next to them, standing with Armin, who, to Eren's relief, still looked completely unafraid of the large creature his friend had become, despite his close near encounter with his teeth. About time, the blonde woman said bluntly. Ainz flared his nostril and Dre cocked his head, but Zwei was entirely unfazed by the bold complaint. He wasn't sure if he appreciated how little she cared that he was a giant monster or if he found it concerning. Easy, Kaven, the older man said in a disarming manner that Eren didn't quite believe. We all have a lot to tell, I'm sure. Eren eyed him with suspicion. There was something about this man, his aura, that was like Mikasa and Levi. Given what those two had in common, that could be trouble. It's okay, Krista said, drawing his attention down. I trust Kenny. You probably shouldn't, Levi warned coolly. Can't say the runt isn't wrong, Kenny remarked in amusement. Krista sighed at that, and Eren decided to leave the matter alone for now. Everyone's attention turned to Krista, as Eren made various growls, grunts, and hisses as Krista listened intently. With a nod, she turned to the group. Eren wanted to ask a few things before we start, Krista stated. And what would that be? Erwin asked, half suspecting the questions already. First, do we have Bertholdt secured? Krista relayed. Obviously we aren't just going to go blurt out where he is exactly, Kaven pointed out. But yeah, the tall fuck is locked up, Kenny confirmed with a smirk. And thanks to Frida, his powers shouldn't be working for a bit. It wasn't lost on Eren that these two answered instead of the commanders. Zwei privately concluded that they likely had Bertholdt rather than the scouts or garrison. Just how did she manage that exactly? Erwin asked with interest on his stoic face. Hell if I know, Kenny answered with a shrug. I don't know how she can do this stuff, just that she can. And Frida wasn't here. Which Eren took to mean she was still out cold after whatever she did to Bertholdt. He grunted to prompt Krista. The second question, Krista started, her face turning grave. What did it cost us? Everyone turned solemn at that, even the normally dramatic Hang. It was Anka who cleared her throat and answered. The current numbers are 23 deaths from the battle, 3 times that many wounded. Most from the blast of the colossal titan's transformation, and his attack on the wall. Those numbers were low, compared to normal casualties humanity faced against the titans. But still, no one missed the pained, angered, and disappointed looks in the 6 eyes on Eren as he took those numbers as a silent wound. Finally, a long breath escaped his mouth, and he made his last question. Has Grice shown back up? Krista answered, leaning toward Ymir. That's the new one, right? She asked in a whisper, getting a nod. No, the slithering bastard is still out hunting, Levi answered. We've seen him in the distance, chewing on the titans, so he hasn't run off. Eren grunted, realizing he had been asleep for even less time than he thought. So, who first? Krista repeated the question, prompting her and the group to turn to Ymir. I think we've waited long enough for answers from you, Levi murmured. Ymir sighed. Okay, where to begin? She told them everything. Everything she knew, at least. The reign of the Eldian Empire, the legend of Helios, and the terrible truth about their giant foes. They could only listen on in absolute silence, the words from her mouth rattling in their mind. The Titans are humans, Erwin repeated solemnly. That news was quite sobering to say the least. Everyone turned in alarm as Eren stumbled back a single step before catching himself, his head hanging low. Eren? Armin called out in alarm as he peered over the side, Mikasa frowning in concern. Eren didn't respond, just looking down at the ground with incomprehension. The divides between Ainz, Zwei, and Dre were entirely and fully overshadowed by their shared struggle to understand this information. The Titans, the maggots, their enemies were humans? Humans trapped in ways they couldn't control, but still. But, were they really human, the Titans? Or were they simply prisons for the humans that became them, forced to go along with their mindless desires? He didn't know. He just knew that he still felt the same rage in his heart as he had for years. He's okay, Krista said sympathetically. He's just in shock, I think. He's trying not to cause a scene. Strange thing to see a big fella like that so rattled, Kenny remarked. You knew all of this? Levi asked with a furrowed brow. Nah, at least not when you were a smaller punk, Kenny mused. I got into the loop when the Blue Bloods recruited me. To answer the question? Yeah, they always have been humans, Emer continued, glancing off to the side as she leaned on the wall. But the 9 are the only ones that can change back and keep their minds. Why, no one can really say. The other Titans? They're just mindlessly trying to eat any people they find. And if they eat one of us, they get that shifter's power. So, that's how you and the others became like this, Armin said with some discomfort as he stared at Emer. Emer nodded curtly. They were sneaking onto the island and my Titan happened to catch them by surprise before they could transform. I think I almost ate Reiner, but the old jaw Titan got in the way. Eren was eerily silent as he took all that in, but then again so were most of them. Hang was quiet for a moment, hands together as she rested her head against them in contemplation. Abnormals. Emer sighed and continued on. No idea really. Regular Titans always look kind of like they did as humans. Some of them just keep a bit more, I guess. Muscle memory or something similar, Hang theorized to herself. And when we cut the neck, where shifters are, I suppose they're in there as well. Emer nodded absently, the scientist running through several things in her head. So, all this time, Levi said with a distant look on his frowning face. We've been killing people? Erwin eyes the captain with a sympathetic gaze but said nothing otherwise. More like putting them out of their misery, Emer said firmly. It's like a nightmare you can barely recall, but it never stops. If Levi took some comfort in that, he didn't show it. Don't go getting yourself tied in a knot about it, Kenny said with a frown. If you can't save someone, sometimes it's better to put them down. Levi definitely didn't take any comfort in that. You're certain that there is still life beyond the walls and this island you say we are on? Pixis inquired with a chin stroke. Emer paused, looking up. I mean, it might be possible that Marley fucked up and the world has been taken over by Titans since last I was around? But Skullface? Grice? He seems to be younger than me in terms of birth years, Emer said uncertainly, not sure how to word that better. Between him and the shifters, I'm assuming humanity is still as fine as it always was. No one commented on that double meaning. Then they came here for the founding Titan, Erwin deduced. They had to have. They wouldn't have risked kicking in the walls otherwise, Emer stated, getting curious looks. As far as the rest of the world knows, you're still the Eldian Empire here. They don't know you've all lost your memories, or that you can't take control of the Titans anytime you want. About that, Hang said with a furrowed brow. How does Marley control the Titans without the founder? A lot like how you herd sheep with dogs, Emer answered flatly. Levi looked at her for a moment before realization came to his eyes. They just unleash them and let things unfold, while using their shifters to deal with them afterward, Erwin summarized. And they use the Eldians in their own lands as cannon fodder. I doubt that's changed much, Emer murmured knowingly. Everyone paused as Eren trembled with rage, his wrath and escape from his shock. He's not saying anything, Krista informed as Eren's tails twitched dangerously. He's just mad. That's putting it lightly, Hang remarked, hand on her hip. Eren, calm down please, Mikasa requested, not wanting Eren to lash out and cause a scene. Each head inhaled and exhaled in sync before nodding sharply for them all to continue. That's about all I have to say. We used to rule the world, we tore ourselves apart and the king fucked off to this island while letting the world go fuck the rest of us over, Emer summarized. I feel there's more to that story, but I believe you've told us most of what you knew, Erwin mused in acceptance. What about the Warhammer? Is it really strong enough to take down the others? Pixis asked contemplatively. I was being serious before. All I heard about it is that no one actually knows what it does, Emer reminded. But considering the Tybers are treated like saviors while they call the rest of us devils, well? And, you think Frieda is the founder? Erwin asked carefully as he eyed Kenny and Kaven, who didn't react to the topic. It's the only thing that makes a little bit of sense, Emer answered with a troubled look of her own. Though I really don't get why the royal family hasn't done anything until now, or why she's crawled out of the shadows, unless it's because of Eren. Kenny grunted. I know why, but I damn well don't know how to explain it. Family had some damn curse on it, best as I can say. Until Frieda, none of them could use the founder as they wanted. Wait, what? Emer exclaimed in shock. What do you mean by that? Do you mean the whole destroying the world thing was a bluff from the start? Emer, calm down, Krista said with a frown. And what do you mean, destroy the world? Emer hesitated, biting her tongue as she looked at Kenny and Caven uncertainly. She had left that little detail out. Anyone shoots me in the eye and I'm whacking them off this wall with my tail. The loud voice was faint, but it brought the conversation to a halt and pulled even Eren's attention as he looked off to the side, Krista poking her head out of the hole with the other cadets. Up on the wall, they could see the unusual form of Grice pulling over the top, the crawler glancing around before easily spotting the giant golden figure. Well, guess the loudmouth is back, Emer mused, glad for the distraction. Without warning, Grice scaled down the walls, using his digits to slide down most of the way. Once at the bottom, he quickly scaled over the buildings, coming towards the building. Eren, Grice greeted, glancing up at the hole. We having a meeting here? Eren felt as awkward as Grice did, he was sure. Yeah, Emer just got done telling us about Marley, Eldia, everything. What she knows, I mean. Well, everyone brace yourselves, I'm coming up, Grice said as he went to the side of the building and climbed onto it. Everyone uneasily steadied themselves as the large creature could be seen looming over one side of the hole. Was that necessary? Anka asked, listening to the creaking wood under Grice's weight. You all picked a building that was just tall enough that I can't just lean my head up and peek into it, Grice argued. Why are we here instead of by the boulder or anywhere outside? Well, if we're going to be working with big beautiful beasts like you two, we thought we should try to do it closer to eye level, Hang answered with a smile. I have very mixed feelings about you, Grice said slowly. Don't worry, you'll come around handsome, Hang said with a wink, leaving the crawler tongue-tied. Almost literally. Are you going to give us your story now? Grice shook his head clear before looking at an impatient Eren. Not just yet. I want to hear what the She-King has to say. She-King? You mean Queen? The hell? Still weird, Grice murmured, glancing between the three heads as he turned to face the humans. Eren says that Emer filled you in on the outside world? She did, Erwin answered calmly. But what do you know of things within the walls? An ally of ours told us some of what went on in here. You all forgot about the outside world because of the first king of the walls turned craven, Grice summarized. About that, Armin commented. You mistook Eren for his father, right? Yes, and who the hell are you kids? Grice asked with a head tilt. My friends and fellow soldiers. Grice nodded absently as Mikasa stepped forward. Mr. Jaeger has been missing for 5 years. But if you can't change back, I don't think he would have a chance to meet you. You're wondering where I have been? Grice realized, shifting uncomfortably. Honestly, I went into a deep sleep. Hibernation, I suppose. I had to. It was the only way to stave off my starvation while trying to get control of this form. Control? Grice snorted. I don't know if it's that form or something about you Jaegers, but I didn't have an easy time getting used to this body. Some part of it fights me and that part is always hungry. Sounds like hell, Levi said with some sympathy. Only at first, Grice said with a head shake. Grisha was supposed to wake me back up. And I thought he did when Eren here kept putting out a call. What? A call? When did we do that? That roar of yours. You know the one, you did it more than once, Grice reminded with some annoyance. The one that stunned Titans? Armin supplied. It did what now? Grice asked, his long snout whipping to Armin in an instant. It does that? We can do that. Eren's can? Armin answered carefully. I feel increasingly cheated in terms of what creatures me and Grisha became, Grice said in envy before making very notable licks at the air. She's here. Levi tensed as Kenny tilted his head to the door. It opened and they were all far less surprised to see Frida than they probably should be. Well, I hope I'm not too late for the meeting, she greeted with a smile. Lady Frida, Erwin greeted neutrally. Or should I say Queen? My, you've already gotten that far? Frida asked rhetorically as she strolled across the room, glancing up at the hole. I see our large friends are all here. I'm friends to my fellow Eldians on Paradis, Grice said pointedly. You? I'm not sure whose side you're on, Fritz. Frida allowed her smile to drop a bit. That's fair. I suppose I should be happy that you haven't tried to eat me. And it's rice now. You helped capture the Colossal, so obviously the vow has either been destroyed or loosened, Grice remarked. The vow? Mikasa asked with her brows knitted together. Frida looked at her and cocked her head. Mikasa Ackerman. Kenny jolted, and it was not easily overlooked. Still, Mikasa kept her attention on the noble. You know who I am? I made it a point to keep an eye on everyone connected to Grisha Jaeger. That might not have been the best thing to say as Grice leaned forwards menacing with a growl, and Eren's eyes glared at her with suspicion. To many people's surprise and frustration, she ignored the two threatening monsters, looking at one person and one person only, Krista. It's been a while. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk at the trial before everything happened. Krista blinked owlishly. I'm sorry, but do I know you? Frida blinked before smiling. Oh, I'm sorry. I was hoping you might remember me by now. My name is Frida Rice. I'm your half-sister. Obviously, Levi remarked, getting looks. They have the same face. He's not wrong, Armin privately admitted. My half-sister? Krista asked in surprise. Wait, so were you? We'll talk later, Frida assured, glancing up at Eren and Grice. If Krista Lenz is your half-sister, Erwin remarked. Why exactly was she hidden in the military? Officially, the reason she knows, to cover up and hide my father's illegitimate child, Frida answered before looking to Krista in apology. In truth, I was trying to protect you. After Wall Maria fell, things were difficult for me. Difficult how? Grice asked, eyeing her pointedly. Frida met Eren's eyes for an instant. Eren blinked as he felt something in the back of his head, and it wasn't the storm. Some half-forgotten memory, lost in a dream. Shining halls, filled with screams and blood, and the faint feeling of power on his tongues. Frida shook her head as she faced the group. Yes, whatever you've heard so far is true. I am the Queen of the Walls and the current holder of the Founding Titan, she explained solemnly as she glanced at Grice. I'm sure you want to know why we abandoned the mainland, she said, looking up to Pixis and Erwin. Why haven't we used the Founder to help against the pure Titans, she said, eyes turning to Armin and Mikasa. Why we allowed things to get this terrible? Both cadets gave her hard stares. They, like Eren, knew well the horrors unleashed by the fall of Maria. And even Armin fully emphasized with Eren's immense capacity for rage, staring at someone who perhaps was responsible for it all in a large way. Annie, Reiner, and Berthold had done the deed, but by all they had been told, the Founding Titan was able to actually control Titans. That kind of power could have stopped it all at any time. Armin balled his fist. A lot of people have died, ma'am, and it sounds like you had every chance to save them. Frida bowed her head at that before her eyes steeled. The Founder has the power to control all Titans and everyone with the blood of our shared ancestor, Ymir. Several heads looked to Ymir at that, who bristled. I'm not that old, you fucks. Frida smiled at that, the mood lightened if only a little. So, how do you think one of the 9 could have rebelled like that? Can the Warhammer resist the Founder? Aang suggested. Frida laughed at that. No, that's the Attack Titan. But it is the only true exception. That explains a few things, Grice said in a strange tone. But it doesn't answer the question. Some just thought that Karl was too weak of will to control the 9. Or, by Marley's account, Helios found a way to muffle the control of the Founder. He didn't, Frida answered with a headshake. Oh shit, Levi said with a frown as something clicked. That king 100 years ago, he didn't really just run to this island because he had to, did he? Frida shook her head. The end of the Eldian Empire was orchestrated by its 145th king, Karl Fritz. There was silence. Most didn't have the context or understanding to grasp the depth of that revelation. But the idea that they had been led here and betrayed by the very king meant to lead them, sentenced to this hell, was something that didn't sit well with any of them. But it was not Eren who took it the worst, shocked though he was. Why? Grice breathed, his voice dangerous, his body trembling. He knew that the 145th king had turned craven, but to go that far mad with self-hatred? The owl had either not known that or spared them of that information. Frida gave him a sympathetic look. The holders of the 9 can receive memories from the past hosts. The Founder can do this even more so. Over 1,000 years of using the Titans as weapons of mass destruction, it pulled at Karl Fritz's heart in a way it hadn't affected his predecessors. I think it drove him insane with grief. So, he used the Tyburs to turn his subjects on each other, to let Marley take over and lead our ancestors here, knowing the world would one day come to finish us off and welcoming them to do so. To that end he placed a vow on the Founding Titan. Anyone of the ruling family, the only ones who can use the Founder's full potential, would succumb to his ideology and his beliefs. Because he thought we were all condemned for the horrors Eldia unleashed in the past and that the world would be better off without us. Because without us, he believed the power of the Titans would be gone as well. For once, Armin identified completely with the snarling rage he could hear emitting from Eren. But it was nothing to the long and loud screech of Grice. It was a terrible shrilling noise that caused Eren to watch the crawler carefully. Without a single word, Grice leapt onto the building across the street and began to slam his fists into the ceiling and slam his tail into the wall beneath him. Eren eyed the display with understanding, his leftmost head glancing about to make sure no one was getting close and that the cannons weren't moving. That rat of a whore. He left all of us to die. He betrayed us to Marley. To everyone. Our friends, our families, our people were treated like vermin and fed to dogs because he was too weak and cowardly to do anything else. He didn't even have the will to do the deed himself. On and on Grice raged, the walls and floors splintering under his wrath. No one said anything, knowing it would be drowned out in the yells and roars. His fists became slower and sluggish, prompting Eren to approach Grice carefully. "We came here looking for something I don't think existed in the first place," Grice whispered in a lost voice, glancing up at the three heads. "Grish is dead, my comrades are gone, and whatever family I have left are either facing a fate worse than death or have become dogs of Marley. What am I even supposed to do now?" With more care than perhaps Eren thought himself capable of, his tail slowly moved over to the crawler, keeping the thorns pressed down in club form, as they gently pushed Grice back to his feet. Grice met Eren's gaze, taking in the solemn but barely contained wrath just behind the empathic emerald eyes. "We do the only thing we can do. Just keep moving forward. Until our enemies are destroyed. All of them." No one noticed Krista shiver. No one noticed Frida close her eyes. End of chapter. Well, the main cast is finally caught up on the Stadio F the world. Even Grice learned some things that he didn't know. Eren, meanwhile, had a mental meeting with the Storm. Not much else to say. Next chapter, however, is where we get into AU lore. Grice will tell his story and Frida will explain her personal story some. Also, new Godzilla x Kong movie got announced for next year. New Empire, which just sounds more and more epic the more I hear about it. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share and donate for more videos.